All right, welcome to today's council meeting, and welcome to those that are in attendance as well. Just to be mindful for my colleagues that these microphones that we can't see are very, very sensitive, so everything we say can be heard, even if you're whispering behind the scenes. So we've got 4 sets of speakers to the public forum. So just to reinforce it, they're 10 minutes each for those that are speaking today. And if you want to have a period where we can ask you questions that you present, then it pays not to use all 10 minutes. So if somebody would like to initially accept the apologies, I have an apology from Councillor on. And BA, all those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Any declarations of interest? There being none, thank you. Public forum, Anna, wherever you are, if you'd like to come forward. Welcome. You can take it as read that we've read your submission that you've presented to us. The floor is yours for 10 minutes. It would be helpful to leave some question time at the end. Excellent.
All right. Kia ora and good afternoon to the Mayor and councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. There is a little bit to get through, so I'll ask you to bear with me. This is Dr. Anna Pallister, and my name is Alex Smith, and I'm here as a local member of the PSNA, which is the Palestine Solidarity Network of Aotearoa. I'm someone who loves this place, and someone who believes in our values, fairness, justice and compassion should be reflected not just in words but in action. I'm someone who cares about where we stand and how public money is spent. Today we are requesting a small, responsible step, that Council update its procurement policy to exclude companies listed by the United Nations as complicit in illegal Israeli settlements in occupied Palestinian territory. I won't read the full resolution, it's been submitted in your agenda notes, but let me be clear. This is not a boycott of Israel, and it's not a sanction. It's a basic ethical housekeeping measure, and it's about ensuring that Invercargill's ratepayer funds aren't spent with companies involved in activities that the international community and our own government consider unlawful. New Zealand's official foreign policy supports a two-state solution. These settlements built on occupied land are widely recognised as serious obstacles to peace. The list we refer to was compiled by the United Nations Human Rights Council in 2020 and has been updated once since. It includes around 90 companies, and the link is provided in your notes. Other councils have already taken this step: Christchurch, Nelson and Environment Canterbury, and they found little to no financial impact. Christchurch and Nelson, in fact, found that they weren't doing business with any listed companies, but adopting the policy ensured they were acting with integrity and demonstrated a commitment to ethical considerations in public spending, reflecting a growing trend among local governments worldwide. This proposal aligns directly with United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334, co-sponsored by New Zealand in 2016 under a national-led government. It remains bipartisan policy and is supported by all major parties. The resolution states clearly that Israeli settlements have no legal validity and are a flagrant violation under international law and a major obstacle to peace. It calls on countries to distinguish between Israel and the territories occupied since 1967. In July last year, the International Court of Justice reaffirmed its position, and it ruled the occupation illegal and in breach of international laws against apartheid and racial segregation. The court gave Israel 12 months to withdraw and confirmed that countries like New Zealand should not provide assistance that helps sustain the occupation. This was endorsed by New Zealand in a UN General Assembly vote. That is precisely what this motion supports, ensuring our public procurement policies don't support companies involved in illegal settlements. So why raise this at the local level? Because international law protects small countries like ours, and upholding that law, even in modest ways, strengthens a global rules-based system that we rely on for trade, security and sovereignty. Our council already includes social and environmental wellbeing in procurement decisions, And Government Procurement Rule 44 allows agencies to exclude suppliers over human rights violations. While councils aren't legally bound by this rule, the Auditor General encourages compliance and notes that failing to meet such standards may carry legal risk. There is precedent for taking ethical stands at local level, flying the Ukrainian flag or declaring Invercargill nuclear-free in the 1980s, along with over 100 other councils. We have also received statements of support for this proposal from around 10 local businesses and organisations, including local Christians, a local Catholic priest, the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions, and the Southland Islamic Trust, which we have some members here today. To reiterate, this proposal is a specific, modest, and well within Council's mandate. It's not a statement on the current war in Gaza. We unequivocally condemn all civilian deaths and all violations of international law, both before and after October 7th. We also reject any conflation of the actions of a state with those of the Jewish people or its citizens. That said, the current humanitarian crisis in Gaza is staggering. In the first 100 days of the conflict, the child death rate was over 100 times higher per capita than any other major 21st century conflict. Meanwhile, in 2023, a newly elected and highly ethno-nationalist government declared its top priority was the expansion of illegal settlements. Plans were announced for over 5,000 more settlement homes in the occupied West Bank, while the world's attention was on the crisis of events continuing in Gaza, which Foreign Minister Winston Peters rightly called horrific and catastrophic. We must ensure we are not complicit. This is a simple and clear step, but it sends a strong message. Just as we don't trade with Hamas, we shouldn't trade with companies enabling Israel's violations of international law. This is not radical, it's measured, practical, and already being done by other councils. We understand that Council cannot adopt this motion today without a staff report, so we respectfully ask that Council agree to commission such a report and that it be brought to a meeting before the upcoming election so it can be properly considered for a vote. In closing, the common question we hear is so far away, and what difference can we make from here? And to that, I would say symbolism matters. If the situation were reversed and if it were Invercargill under occupation, we would welcome international solidarity in any form. When we fly flags in support of Palestine, we receive positive feedback and support in the vast majority. And in those moments, one quote comes to mind. I'm only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. So respectfully, I ask this council to please stand with us on the right side of history, and I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you for the presentation. Councillors, questions? Yeah, Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I may be the only city councillor around this table to have been caught up in a Palestinian protest at the domestic escape in Jerusalem some years ago. So I just want you to be clear, especially in light of the last few paragraphs, that what you are asking this council to do is to bring a report to council on which we can vote along the lines of the resolution you have suggested, and that this is in no way asking this council to take a political stance. It is saying that there is international law this council can abide by, and that you are saying we have an ethical obligation to consider that. But you are not asking this council to take a political stance. You are not referring to the issues of what has been described as genocide and other issues that have been brought before the International Court of Justice.
No, we're not. No, thanks for your question, Leslie. No, we're not. We're very, very clearly just asking for a council to amend its procurement laws just about companies, which are Israeli and international companies, that are complicit with the settlements, the illegal settlements. We're not even saying we don't want council to buy anything from Israeli companies, just we don't want council to buy anything from this list that the United Nations has compiled, which is solely to do with the illegal settlements, which is what the UN law is so opposed to. So this is nothing really, although it's obviously connected, this has nothing to do with genocide or taking sides. It's actually kind of levelling out the sides. We wouldn't buy from Hamas, we shouldn't buy from, like was said in the talk, we shouldn't buy from companies that are involved in this violation of international law, whether they're Israeli or from any other country. So it's very clearly not taking sides, just tidying up our housekeeping to respect this particular violation.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Steve.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for your very thorough and measured submission. I guess a question for you, Mayor, is can I request that staff report, and what is that process?
Well, we'll need one anyway. It's one of the issues that I was going to raise is our procurement policy is a generic policy. It gets reviewed every 6 years, and we're about to review the current one. If you put in this particular issue purely around the settlements, then are we going to be putting ones in about Ukraine, about Somalia, Yemen? I mean, the list goes on. So I'm only picking that such a policy would have to have a general statement that says that we don't breach any United Nations resolutions in our procurement, which would cover the situation, but cover other situations, or otherwise we'd be constantly revisiting it. So yeah, we'd need a staff report anyway.
I'm happy to second the request for a staff report.
Yeah, we'll do that anyway. I've got a couple of questions for you. We're getting very close to time. Do you have any evidence that the government has breached the resolution?
Speak up a bit, Nobby.
Oh, sorry. Do you have any evidence or any suggestion that the government, which is at a much higher level than us, is breaching the resolution that you referred to? Are they dealing with companies that you're aware of?
So at the moment, I mean, two things. I heard you. I want to just speak to what you said earlier.
Sure.
So before the United Nations said anything, New Zealand has already made a law about trading with Russia.
Sure.
So that's already sorted, really, and you've probably had to adjust your procurement already to do with that. So your question, what's your question again? Sorry, I'm trying to hear you. Yeah.
Does central government, who made the commitment on behalf of
So central government hasn't yet put in any action to comply their procurement with to sanction Israel in any way. They haven't. But what they have done is said it's fine for local councils to do this, and the New Zealand procurement law says, which is Rule 44, says it's fine for councils and government agencies to not procure with companies that are involved in human rights violations. So while the central government hasn't taken a lead on this like they did with Ukraine, what we're saying is other councils have taken a lead on this. The more councils that do take a lead on this, the more likely central government will step up and do what it's already promised to do, which is take a lead on doing the same for the illegal settlements as they've done already for Russia. So that's where it stands. Is that answering your question?
And the other issue, the second issue for me, is the issue of the Auditor General. So in your submission, you make reference to the Office of the Auditor General encouraging councils follow that Rule 44. So I will be checking to make sure that that is the case.
Yeah.
The Auditor General does have that requirement on us, but also to suggest that is he checking, or she checking, it's he, is he checking on central government as well?
It's more that the Auditor General suggests you comply, or you're at risk of legal action. It's not a law as such. But
actually, you're responsible for your own procurement, which is why it's a local issue. And the Auditor General recommends it not only because you might get a legal challenge, but also because you might get stakeholder challenges, which in a sense is what's happening here. This is a stakeholder challenge.
Yep. I understand that. But as I said before, it will not be that easy to insert just the one issue that you're requiring. Otherwise, we would have constantly be upgrading the procurement policy because there are numerous United Nations resolutions that sanction the behaviour of some other people. And you can just think about Ukraine and Russia. You can think about Yemen at the moment, and lots of breaches around the African continent as well. So that doesn't minimise your cause, but it just means that our policy will probably end up saying that we should be compliant with the resolutions of the United Nations, especially around human rights breaches. But it'll be specific to the Israel situation. That's something we need advice on.
Yeah, it's more to abide, I guess, by United Nations, the United Nations resolution,
Yeah.
and that's probably more we're asking council to.
We should
And
always
that
be
just like our government has a list of companies that we're not meant to trade with basically because of Russia.
Yep.
So they have that list, they maintain a database, the New Zealand government maintains that. So the United Nations is maintaining this database about these companies involved in the illegal settlements. So you have that done for you.
Sure. Yep. Okay. Tom.
So that I can be clear about the question that you're asking, therefore, what already has been, moved and seconded. You are suggesting that we ask officers to bring back a report on whether we actually do business with any of those companies?
Whether you do business about it, how much effort it's going to take to change that law. It's one of, like Nelson asked that question of their staff report. What's on the list, yeah? What's on the list?
The
and
first
how-
stage I would imagine would be
Checking
to
the
establish whether anybody, because otherwise, you end up debating something that's actually meaningless because
Well, it isn't meaningless.
no, I'm sorry, that's not the right word.
Yeah.
What I mean is
You might
if
not be
we
doing
don't do
anything.
business with anybody on that list, then it no longer becomes relevant to me.
It only becomes relevant for future decisions then.
And as a symbolic gesture as well.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yeah, Peter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some years ago, maybe still in existence, was a Invercargill-based company making parts for overseas aircraft. Now, if the company they're making these parts for are involved with these terrible things that are happening that you've mentioned, what do we do? It's a company in Invercargill, if they're still there, they're paying their rates, they're employing local people. I just want that cleared up a bit.
Well, that's more of a global position on what's happening in the war, I guess, rather than what's happening in terms of settlements in the West Bank. So that's kind of separate. That's for a separate discussion, I think, than what we're trying to achieve today.
Yeah.
But I think there has been positions taken on that within local governments and governments worldwide. We can sit here to the cows come home trying to discuss the merits around that, but I don't think it's what we're here to discuss today.
Mention it anyway. Thank you.
Okay, guys, thank you for your time. We'll see the report that you asked for. Okay, Kath and Brian, wherever you are. What's on the list? You're welcome. Welcome again. Mr. Council,
Thank you.
you have a few minutes and the floor is yours.
Okay. With regard to the adoption of the Sandy Point Management Plan being discussed here today, these are our thoughts and feelings, specifically in relation to the village of Coopers Creek, Sandy Point. The draft management plan makes references to cultural and historical places of significance throughout the Sandy Point domain. Some examples include page 65, that the names of park features tell the story of the place and reflect the area's natural and cultural heritage, both pre and post-colonial settlement. Also on page 65, incorporate design and interpretation of elements which reflect a distinct sense of place, tell local history stories, and convey the community's ongoing connection with the domain. The master plan, which informs the draft management plan, has made Coopers Creek virtually invisible. In the draft management plan itself, scant references to Coopers Creek are consistently negative, punitive, and deconstructive. We consider the village of Coopers Creek to be a unique and significant treasure, not unlike Cozy Nook and other places throughout Aotearoa, New Zealand. Coopers Creek has been consistently peopled and planned for since 1950 for legal residential homes and holiday cribs. My heartfelt question to you, our elected members, is why would you ever agree to wiping out such a treasure? Since 1950, villagers have lived peaceably as kaitiaki of the area. In turning the domain into a reserve, the Council of the Day in 1991 imposed upon the legal residents of Coopers Creek a burden of insecurity that exists to this day. This is your opportunity to right the wrongs of the past in relation to Coopers Creek. Your own legal advice has been that it is possible to permit Coopers Creek Village to remain in perpetuity under current legislation, requiring little more than a quote-unquote U-turn on the part of our elected members. This has been raised several times by several people in past submissions, and to date, residents have no evidence that this option has ever been acknowledged by council, nor any evidence that it has been explored or debated. Surely we would have been privy to that process if it had ever occurred. I end today with quoting from the minutes of the May 6th, 2025 meeting of the Wellbeing Committee. In relation to council adopting Parks and Reserves recommendation of a non-renewable 35-year lease for residents of Coopers Creek, the following was minuted. And I'm quoting here from the minute. It was noted by an elected member that the plan was superficial and did not address or acknowledge the rights of Coopers Creek leaseholders. It was noted that the council had already made a decision on this. The community has been given a sinking lid that enabled only one sale of their property. This was a breach of the Local Government Act, and the councillor would not support the recommendation. So finally, I ask today why this was a lone voice and not echoed by all elected members. Thank you.
Questions? Well, I'll start with one anyway.
Oh, hang on, Nobby, I think, Brian, do you want to say
sorry.
anything?
I'll just add to it, just with the history of Coopers Creek. The name came about from Owen McShay, who was a Cooper, and the creek got called after him right next to where the settlement is now, hence it's called Coopers Creek. Now, if you go onto page 31 of your draft plan, it's got a map there. And I'd just like to point out that same map has been used in the last 35 years, and Coopers Creek has not appeared on it. Particularly the fact that Owen McShay is a well-known character, not only at Coopers Creek, the Hilco Museum and Riverton have got quite a display and a lot of information on him. And he's also well-known in Bluff as well. So I just sort of thought it's time probably for the council to recognise us as a historical place on that map as well. I think that's about all at this stage. Yep.
Okay, so I've just got a quick question for you. Kath, when you refer to in perpetuity, what would that look like? Does that mean that for the next 200, 300, 400 years that the properties would stay there? Who would own them if it wasn't the current tenants? Being mindful that the current tenants, I understand, happy for staff to correct me if I'm wrong, have leases.
The only thing I heard there, Nobby, was what would in perpetuity look like to me. It would look like very much in perpetuity to the full meaning of the word, that people would be able to live there peaceably forever, the same as people would live in Invercargill or Riverton or Bluff or Auckland. That the notion of wiping out something that has existed for, well, since 1950, a long, long period of time, we believe has historical significance, both now and in the past. People live there, we've got elderly folk there. I just can't get my head around why the village that existed, that had the change of land imposed upon it, should need to be deconstructed.
So I just want to work that through a little bit, just for my benefit. Don't take this the wrong way. Brian passes away, and eventually you get to the end of your life, for argument's sake, and you need to go into aged care or something. What would you expect would happen to the lease? Would you be able to sell it, given that at this stage they're issued by council?
I would expect that I would be able to sell our home out there at any point in the future. But whether that was being elderly and not being able to live there or travel out there, or whether that might be next week if, you know.
Basically, on now, what's happened now with putting that extra restriction on properties, no one's put anything on the market there. It's not for the boardroom to say what people will get for the properties. It is the market that will display that. With the extra risk factor that you're throwing into it, has made it a lot more difficult for people wanting to sell. But therefore, if they can't sell, the price falls away to practically nothing. So there's people out there that would want to sell, but simply because age is running against them as far as being able to get some money out of their property if they want to go into a home. So that extra risk factor that's been thrown in with land has not helped things, it's hindered things completely for people wanting to sell. And if you say about passing it on to members of the family, we've already discussed it with our family. All of a sudden, people start to think, well, we don't want a burden, and that comes along. So that one factor of throwing in, only be able to having one resale of the property, it is not good. If there's any person here would like that restriction put on their property, please raise your hand.
Just one quick reflection as well. Kath, you made reference to the master plan.
Pardon?
You made reference to the master plan as opposed to the management plan as well, so there's two.
Yeah.
Just being mindful that the master plan has no legal authority under the Act.
I'm aware of that,
Yeah.
that it's not a mandated document.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's more of a management tool that we use for long-term.
It just stuck out to us
Yeah.
from years ago when we engaged with Boffin School to discuss it, that Cooper's Creek was virtually invisible.
Yeah.
And yet we were named as stakeholders, which kind of seemed a bit of an oxymoron to me.
I'd just like to add to that, when Boffin School presented their report to council, there's a number of councillors asked the question, why isn't Cooper's Creek mentioned in the report? I can remember that meeting.
Okay. Yep. Rangi.
Coopers Creek used to be residential C before it got made into a reserve. Now, I believe if you look through the Local Government Act, that is a breach of taking away the rights of landowners who were in a residential area. Now, have you thought of going to the Ombudsman and putting your case of council's actions and the way they've gone about this, and they've left you now with the sinking lid thing, the position you're in? Have you thought about going to the Ombudsman?
Kerry's done a powerful load of work with the Ombudsman with regards to the imposition of a huge fee hike on us, and that whole process, including council, came to the table, and that was a great outcome from our perspective.
I think there's something greater here and deeper besides fees.
Yeah.
It's your future.
For me, Rangi, it's not just our future, it's the future.
Oh, no, it's the
Coopers
future of
Creek.
Cuba Creek.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry.
To come in and say, this place is not going to exist anymore.
Okay, you might.
It's just, it's hard to find words.
You might have to wait till October.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also, like you, trying to get a little bit more clarification on the meaning of the use of the term in perpetuity. Can I ask the submitters, is your submission a submission for the freehold tenure of the Coopers Creek land, or is it a submission for leasehold in perpetuity, or is it something else? I'm not understanding where you're coming from. Are you discussing possible freehold tenure? Are you still discussing leasehold tenure, but you're defining leasehold tenure in a different form?
For me personally, I'm saying that anything that allows the village of Coopers Creek to carry on in perpetuity, as in forever, whether that be leasehold, whether that be freehold, I want that to be negotiated. I want that to be fully explored. And I feel that there needs to be something more than, oh, you're a reserve now and you can't be here, you're non-conforming, because we weren't non-conforming prior to that change. Does that answer your question? I'm not wedded to leasehold or freehold. I'm just wedded to not the village not disappearing. It's not about us. It's about the fact that this is a place that's existed, and it's a very unique and special place. Everyone that comes out there kind of understands that. You've only got to drive into the place and you're aware of the spirituality and the peacefulness and the beauty of the area. I feel heartbroken to think that post us living there, that this place wouldn't exist. We're not asking for it to be extended. We're not asking to make our houses bigger. We're not asking for development. We don't want to run businesses out of it. We simply want to be able to live there, and for other people to come and live there as the wheel of time rolls on.
So you're asking for the ability for the current leaseholder community to be able to, in perpetuity, through the generations, as the Mayor said, for potentially hundreds of years, to be able to reassign leases. Is that what I'm understanding you to say?
Yes. Because the way that it stands now, we have quite elderly folk out there who possibly within the next 5 to 10 years will no longer be able to live there. may be unlikely that their descendants would want to invest in something that they'll never realise the capital from. So therefore, that's why I've talked about deconstructing. Those homes are under the 35-year sinking lid policy are likely to be deconstructed and carted away. And so therefore it's a getting rid of us by stealth, even way before 35 years.
And putting the restriction on sale, one sale, is obviously the biggest factor out there at the moment for it's going to put pressure on the community. It's by far the biggest risk at the moment.
So Ms. Mayor, a supplementary question. So your submission is not to be able to assign the lease on to family members in perpetuity. Your submission is that you want to be able to sell what you're describing as a lease in perpetuity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cooper's Creek has changed hands over the years with properties there. It's given the ability of people, if they want to sell, to move on. I don't know, there's several families that have been there over the years, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we want to pass it on to our family. It's just if health or any sort of problem happens with you, to be able to sell it. And the same goes for the next person who buys it and may get sick and want to sell it.
Or may get a job transfer and move to Auckland and want to sell it. It's, you know, it could be hundreds, if not thousands of reasons why you might want to sell a property. But
Thank you,
that's only,
that's clarified what I had asked.
Tom?
Thanks. The management plans in the past have similarly had restrictions in them and words which have been uncomfortable for the residents, and you were keen to remove those. The only real change in this one is the change from 1-year licenses to 35-year licenses. So are you advocating that we go back to the way it was and simply remove that option of the 35-year license? Is that what you would wish to happen?
what I'm advocating for, Tom, is that I'm more than happy with the 35-year licence, provided that it's renewable, because for me, I'm not a lawyer, but that equates to perpetuity.
But you prefer to leave the 35-year licence, and that's what I was just trying to understand, whether you were opposed to that or whether you were in favour of that.
Pardon?
No, sorry, I was just trying to understand whether you were in favour of the 35-year licence or you were opposed to it, because there is an option that we can simply take it out. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just got a question to add to that, Kath, and I know we're running out of time. I think when we had the discussions, one of the benefits of the 35, and there's some negatives, I understand that. One of the benefits of the 35-year period was it gave you some certainty. When you have a 1-year lease, there's nothing to stop a council saying no lease next year.
And that's what I was
That's what we were trying to achieve, was to give you some certainty, which would at least supersede the lifespan of the current residents, I guess.
But that my whole point is it's not about the current residents per se. It is, of course.
Sure.
It's about the village of Cooper's Creek not being wiped off the face of the earth. Whether that's us, whether that was people who lived there 50 years ago or people who lived there 50 years into the future. You know, there's I kind of can't put into words
No, I
what.
understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. If you hang around for the latter part of the meeting, you'll hear us debate that then, which will be the acceptance of the current plan, or whether we put that aside or not and revisit.
And I have to say, I appreciate the council taking on board earlier on, trying to rectify, for 1-year lease. There's been a lot of work go into it, by and large, and a number of villages do prefer having the 35-year time frame. So that's good, but it's not really solving the problem really of people that want to get out of it now they're looking down the barrel of probably with their profits they try to sell, might be from 25 to 50% of what they'll get in value. It hasn't been tested.
Got a copy of what we've
Thank you.
seen today. Thank you very much for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Yes, Bob McCurry.
We've been told for years that if we want any changes to our tenure, we have to get it in the management plan. Despite trying to do just that, our voices are not being heard. We are actually surprised that we have been given permission to speak today, as out of the 6 meetings that have been held regarding our tenure to date, we've had permission to speak, refused twice, not been given adequate notice to speak at another, and no notice whatsoever of the 4th, despite requesting permission to speak. Our first opportunity to speak to any of the meetings wasn't until the 3rd meeting. Despite all of the individual meetings that were held with residents, there were only 2 options that were put forward to council elected members that the residents supported, and that was freehold and 35 years with the right of renewal. Our preferred option at the time was to revoke the reserve status, but that was completely ignored despite the fact we had paid a consultant to write a submission for us that was to be included in the management plan. How can this process be considered fair and reasonable? Put yourself in our position where we are fighting for our homes and the future of our community, and we get 10 minutes, considering 5 minutes are to deliver our submissions and 5 minutes are for questions, to justify our existence, and our elected members decide to vote for end of life. As far as we are concerned, this is a death sentence for the community of Coopers Creek. Why would our elected members vote for this when they know it is not what the residents want? We thought that our elected members were there to support us and not collude to get rid of us with no justification whatsoever. There have never been any submissions presented stating that we shouldn't be there, so that means 58,000 people in Invercargill were in support of us being there. Why would anyone want to see a local community eliminated, a community that has legally existed before any of the current councillors were born? There has been absolutely no consideration given to residents or the history of our village, what begs the question, why aren't councillors listening to their constituents? Not only are the residents not being listened to, but the council's own legal advice is being ignored. Council have had legal advice in their position since 28th of February 24 that clearly states that it would be permissible for residents to be there as long as it was included in the management plan. This advice has been presented to the elected members on numerous occasions, the latest being 25 March 25, and despite 3 submitters speaking about this advice, there was absolutely no mention of it in the deliberations held on the 1st of April 25. In our opinion, there is no excuse for this. Your role is to support the people that elected you, and that is certainly not the case with Coopers Creek. All we ask for you to do what you were elected to do based on your own legal advice and include us in the management plan. And I have that legal advice here.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the City Council's governance statement for 22 to 25. And it says here what the purpose and functions of that we are here for. And it says quite clearly in our governance statement to enable democratic local decision-making and action by and on behalf of communities. Now, do you think council is living up to its governance statement?
No. I'd love the judicial review.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I have an observation and some questions for you, Kerry, based on the statement you just made. It's been my observation that Tom and Rex put an awful lot of consultation hours into each and every one of the residents out there. And while at times we might have discussions about freehold, The reality is, I don't think any council would get approval to freehold the land there.
I find that quite hypocritical, Nobby, because you're doing it for Awarua Reserve, you've done it for Maui Reserve, you're doing it for Mokomoka Reserve and Donovan Park Reserve.
That's not the issue the issue is not the reserve.
What is that?
The issue is if you change the reserve status to residential, we would need to get consent to build a residential subdivision close to a water. And I'm telling you now, we wouldn't get that. The approval would go against us.
Awarua Reserve is close to the
It's
The
not,
next
it's
street?
not as close to the water. I mean, there's any amount of government advice for us not to be approving residential developments close to water sources. And the other issue for me, I guess, is that when we canvass the residents individually, most of them, from my recollection, were not in a position or had a desire to actually have to buy the land themselves. So what do you do if you what do you do if 3 or 4 residents agree to buy the land, we freehold it, but the others say, no, we can't afford it?
one that the ones that can afford it buy them.
You do that when you sell the property, and you could put that in, the new person could buy the land as well as the property.
Well, I'm just teasing you, I'm a lay person on this. If we've got, let's say we've got 15 properties out there, there might be more or less than that. If we put that land out of reserve status into residential, then the residents would have to buy the land.
Mm-hmm.
You buy the land, Kath buys the land, but the rest don't. What do? Do we sell it on to somebody else who might want the land? What the other residents think of it?
Lawyer's advice on that one. Yeah.
Sorry?
Have to get a lawyer's advice on that one.
Well, you can't expect to have a residential piece of land and not pay for it.
Yeah, but you could have a still.
Mr. Chair, we're getting into a situation of debate with the submitters, which is not what submissions are intended for or are about, and sets an awkward precedent for future submissions. The purpose of the submitters being here is not to debate the issue, but to present their submission.
That's fine. I'm chairing this meeting, and if I need to seek some clarification before we make a decision later on today, I'd like to know what the residents are actually wanting and their line of logic, so that when I come to make a decision.
We've basically parked our freehold in revoking the reserve status aspirations because we believe that this clause in your legal advice would allow for us to be there. What it says is this in short, if the Sandy Point Management Plan was amended to allow for the Cooper's Creek cribs, then that would be permissible under section 44. And surely that would be forever.
Alan,
With what you just read in, would that mean that you'd be able to purchase the properties? Because I could see, you could probably see no reason why, if you're going to purchase it, you could, and if others wanted to just keep on leasing, they could. And some,
Under 44A, that one that she's talking about, that Kira's talking about, I think it's a lease.
it's only this.
There is a statutory prohibition upon using reserve for permanent or temporary personal accommodation without the minister's approval contained in section 44(1) of the Reserves Act. There are exceptions to this prohibition to allow personal accommodation of buildings set aside for such activities as ranges, residence, dock, camping grounds, huts, cabins, and shelters or lodges. Section 44(1)(e) provides a further exception for areas defined on management plans prepared under section 41 and for the time being enforced. This exception would mean that if the Sandy Point Management Plan was amended to allow for the Cooper's Creek cribs, then that would be permissible under section 44.
You know, to agree with you, like you barely mentioned in the
In the management plan.
You know, the fact that you guys are residents here, you would have thought you'd be onto the floor.
This has been presented on more than one occasion, but it hasn't been discussed at all. And it's not coming from us, it's coming from your lawyers.
Ray.
Just a quick question. Thank you, Chair. This used to be, Cooper's Creek used to be residential C, owned by people. So when it suddenly was deemed to be reserve land, were the people of Cooper's Creek compensated for the sudden
No, they weren't getting
loss
consulted with.
of,
There's no
it's
consultant.
like suddenly turning Waikiwi
Yeah.
residential into reserve land.
Yeah.
Wow,
And there's no consultant.
I'm not a
there's no-
lawyer, but I don't know how that was able to be done
wow.
with people already living there.
There was no consulting at the time.
Okay, that's an interesting one, yeah.
Emma.
I don't know where to start with this. You do understand that after the Murihiku purchase in 1853, there were owners there. With a swipe of a pen, they were parcelled into very small, unsustainable lots. In I've lost the place. In 1889, Sandy Point was designated a recreation reserve. So this wasn't suddenly in 1950. You do understand that.
Can I just say something here? In 1889, when the rest of the place was a reserve, our block wasn't.
So Sandy Point as a whole was dedicated to a recreation reserve. When the status changed was as a result of legislation. It happens all the time.
Point of order.
I'm asking a clarification from people who have said that this was suddenly and unsurprisingly, and there's been a progression of change, not one sudden change from one status to the other. I really want to understand why the Coopers Creek residents feel that they are immune from changes of government legislation and land status, because it has happened incrementally in lots of places over the years, and sadly Coopers Creek has been caught up in it, but it's not, you are aware that it was a progression of change.
Like I said, we were an exception to that reserve in 1889. It's gazetted.
So when the status of the land was changed by a subsequent government for different reasons, they didn't have the right to do that?
No, people existed. People existed out there from 1950. We were there for 40 years. Then they decided to put it back into a recreational reserve. It was changed to a domain. And the council allowed people to build out there, get consents to build. They made sections available because they wanted more beachside properties.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? No? Thank you very much. Feel free to listen to the debate later on.
Thank you.
Okay. We've got Jeff Smith, have we?
I'm going to set my timer because I've got so much to cover. I'm going to run out of time. Gosh, where to start? I didn't actually plan on talking about Coopers Creek at all. Hoping not to, but apparently we need to. My take's a little bit different. So I'm going to remind Council of the conversation that you had in September 2024 and the resolution that you passed, which resulted in, 21 plus 7 plus 7 with the right to sell your property. The problem, well, actually, no, to remind you of the conversation. The conversation you had centered around a few things like, are we going to put a sinking lid on this? What's our actual overarching view of the village? And what can we do if we are in favour of the village being there? What can we do to keep the village? And I think where you landed with the 21 plus 7 plus 7 and the ability to sell was the right solution. The downside is, I think, how it happened. So to remind you, it was presented as a 35-year option, and then to make it more palatable, you changed it to a 21 plus 7 plus 7 for a maximum of 5 years, a maximum of 35 years. Now, those two things sound the same, and they sound the same within the context of the conversation that you're having, which is are we getting rid of you? And the answer to that question, by the way, was no, we aren't. What is our broad view of the village? So you landed at 21 plus 7 plus 7 with the right to remove for 7 plus 7 for a maximum of 35 years. And it sounds the same, but it's not, because the language is for a maximum of 35 years. And what that implies is that it's got a sinking lid on it. And that wasn't your intent at all. So that's why I'm here to remind you of the conversation you had was actually around, we want to keep you, we want to make it palatable for a minister to approve, and so therefore let's change it. But in changing it on the fly, I think you introduced a new problem, which is that word for a maximum of 35 years. So that's where I think the problem starts to come from. And then of course, the media, who you don't have any control of how they report it, the media reported it as it's the end of the village, and that wasn't what you passed. When you passed that resolution in September 2024, there were people who asked the question, if I vote yes for 21 plus 7 plus 7, am I saying this is a sinking lid? And the instruction from the chair to those people was very clearly, no, that's not what you're voting for. What you're voting for is this is the best solution we think we can provide, and it's not a sinking lid, and that we fully expect licence holders, whoever they may be, to be able to come back and ask for an extension or a renewal at some point within that 35-year period. That was the clear instruction from the chair. And so that's how it was passed. But again, as I say, because of the way it was changed on the fly and the way it was changed to maximum of 35 years, it was reported as a sinking lid. And what that's done for us is it's reduced the value of our properties. And I think it's not unfair to suggest that potentially, simply by phrasing it that way, you might have wiped off unintentionally, absolutely, $100,000 to $150,000 of equity off people's homes, and that's 17 Southland households that's happened to. So it's an unintended consequence, and I think there's an obligation on you to remedy that. And I'm not suggesting that you go back and change the decision that you made, but I am suggesting that there are ways to clarify to the public and to the media and to us and within this management plan what your actual intention was. So I've got two suggestions. I'm just going to take a quick little drink. Two resolutions to pass, I think, that would correct the record back to what you intended in that meeting. The first is that you resolve that in a licence to occupy, which will need to be produced, and a licence to occupy, it shall contain wording similar to, nothing in this licence excludes the licence holder from seeking an extension or renewal beyond the term specified, which is the 35 years. And ideally, also, nothing in this licence shall be considered as setting an end date to the village. If you were to pass that resolution, you aren't changing the decision that you've already made. You're simply saying this is providing clarity about what you actually thought at the time. The second thing you could do is resolve that the licence to occupy should be worded in such a way as to clearly articulate that the licence is transferable, and that any new or subsequent licence holder also inherits that right to transfer. So it's a right to transfer of anyone who holds the licence. Those two actions would, for the most part, from my perspective, solve the issue of the value that's being coming out of the properties. It would solve the insecurity, because it's now defined clearly as not a sinking lid. And so you can do those two things quite easily to solve that. And then moving into the future, of course, we know things like the RMA is going to be changing, and we might find that it's a little bit easier to do things like subdivide next to water or whatever. And of course, the district plan is also within your purview to add those special clauses to accommodate Cooper's Creek. So you could do that. I have quite a bit to cover, so I'm going to leave you with those two thoughts. I've got a copy of that if anyone wants to know what my wording was. I'll leave one here. The other part, having reminded you of the conversation that you had around Cooper's Creek, and that the majority of you by far were in favour of the village and retaining its nature and its character that it adds to Invercargill, I would ask you to review, and I wrote this in my written submission, to review some of the wording that is actually in the management plan around how Cooper's Creek is referred to. we have, I'll read briefly, I'll be running out of time shortly anyway. Paragraph 1 is, within the boundaries of the domain, there are 2 areas of residential buildings that have been identified as non-conforming in previous RMPs and according to the Recreation Reserve classification. Obviously, non-conforming has always been a problem for us. Non-conforming implies that we aren't meant to be there. When you, as a council, pass a resolution that says you can have 35 years and come back and ask for more when the 35 years is up, that's you giving us permission to be there. So it doesn't make sense to call us non-conforming because, of course, we do conform with the plan. So change that language is my request. The next phrase is generally the Act. Generally the Act does not permit private dwellings on land managed as a reserve. I refer you to your General Policies Reserve Management Plan 2023, which you will pass in this term. I can't expect you to remember everything that is in that plan, of course, but I will again point out to the language that was used in this plan. It speaks of occupation agreements are a common form of authorisation granted by council to a person or organisation that is occupying a reserve on a relatively long-term basis. Occupation agreements are a common form of authorisation. Generally, the Act does not permit private dwellings on land managed as a reserve. Those two things are counterfactual. They don't align with each other. One has to be wrong. And I would suggest that the one that is in your occupation policies, which aligns better with the actual Reserves Act, is the correct version. So it is a curious thing to see commentary around Cooper's Creek being defined as generally it's not meant to be permitted. That doesn't make any sense to me. So for all of these paragraphs that I'm going to refer to, I would request that you actually use your powers to reach into this this draft plan and either take those out or mandate that they be rewritten to reflect what you actually think about the village, because your thoughts on the village were very clear back in September. The original intention of permitting cribs in the domain was that they were to be used as holiday or weekend homes. However, over the years, some buildings have been considerably upgraded past the modest crib and are now used as permanent places of residence. That is an outright falsehood. We have provided the documentation on a couple of occasions now. The original lease in 1957 clearly said it was for holiday or residential use. If those two things meant the same thing, there would be no reason to have both of those terms. They obviously mean different things. So the other part of the lease said that you have to, before you build, you have to submit your building plans to the council, and your building plan has to meet the health code and the building code. So things were built to a high standard. So it's excuse me, it's an outright incorrect statement to say that we are not originally meant to be holiday homes. We were always meant to be residential as well as. And the final one that I took issue with was the matter of having small groups of cribs situated at the heart of the domain has been a long-standing issue and one that council has progressed with licence holders to determine how best to satisfy the future tenure opportunities for licence holders and whether private accommodation in the domain can be permitted or not. In my written submission, I said the first sentence should be shortened by the removal of the words and whether private accommodation on the domain can be permitted or not. You have the ability to do what you've done, which is grant a 35-year term, and therefore the question of whether we can be permitted or not has been settled. So it's again another factually incorrect statement to say that that question is somehow still up for debate. It's not. Excuse me. So again, my request is that you exercise your powers to reach in, either modify that text or mandate that it gets rewritten to reflect what you think of the village. Because I think if you cast your mind to how you feel about the village, those things don't reflect it. That's my takeaway from watching your discussion on the 24th, on the September 2024. Plan, thank you very much for getting rid of the road restriction clause. Good on you for that. The downside is there are still road closure policies in there, page 63 of the document or page 124 of today's agenda. 8.2.1.2, subclause 2 says that as resources permits, internal roads may be reduced or improved in order to my suggestion is that you just outright remove that. There's no reason for there to be a policy in there that says that the Parks Department has blanket permission to close roads. And if you are of the opinion that you would like to keep something like that in there, then I suggest that you add this, which is following notice to the public and approval from council as resources permit, internal roads may be reduced. Closure or restriction of access should be taken quite seriously. And it's no small thing to simply just give blanket permission for a Parks Department to just do what they want. And they should be solving the public. So that's my request for you to actually action those things, particularly if you're planning on approving this plan today. And if I'm allowed to continue talking, I will, because there's one really more important thing that I want to cover.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Which is to say that the resolution or recommendation 10 today says that, if I find it, the recommendation is that you approve the plan as it is, and that you approve it and recommend for adoption by Department of Conservation as delegate of the Minister of Conservation. So there's a few things, and that obviously today I've highlighted a few areas that still need work on. It's not ready for approval yet, in my opinion. The other part to that, of course, is that you already have ministerial authority delegated to you to approve the plan. You don't need to send it to DOC. That is part of, again, your document, General Policy Reserve Management Plan 2023. You part of that. Again, I can't expect you to remember everything that's in there, but on page 70 is the ministerial delegation of authority and a table of all of the authorities that you have been delegated by the minister. And one of those on page 70 is to approve reserve management plans. And then there is a column for limitations of powers, and there are no limitations to that power granted to you. So you have that authority to do so. Further to that, the Reserves Act 1977, section 41, subsection 13, says where a recreational reserve, which is what Sandy Point is, is vested in a local authority, which is you, or a local authority is appointed to control and manage the recreational reserve. The local authority shall not be required to submit its management plan to the Minister for approval unless the terms of vesting or appointment to control and manage the reserve so require, which in this case I don't believe they do. Provided that the local authority shall make its management plan available for inspection by or on behalf of the Minister whenever so required. So you have ministerial approval to approve the plan yourself. So Minister, you've got DOC who have been delegated authority for approve it, and you've got yourselves who are delegated to approve it. It doesn't make any sense to me why you would approve it yourselves and then send it to DOC. The extension to that, of course, is this. The reason I raise it is because it's about democracy. Because we elect all you people. Right? You all go out to the public and you say, this is who I am and this is what I stand for. Here's my values, here's my vision for the future. And then you subject yourselves to the vote. And you all are sitting here because of that process. And it's no offence to the staff at DOC, but the staff at DOC are not subject to a vote or subject to accountability to the public. So it doesn't make any sense to me in a democracy why a elected body would send their work output to an unelected body for approval. Doesn't make sense. You both have the same level of approval, so just approve it. And as soon as you approve it, it's operative.
Excellent.
That's it.
Just one quick question for you before I open it up for others. I know the area well, and you will as well. I know the area well, and you will as well. On the issue of the roading, it seems to me that the futuristic risk is between Dunn's Road and probably up where the old ski club is, or somewhere around about there. There's potential for flooding. I don't agree with that.
Risk, yes.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
But surely Pitt Road is an alternative to scoot around that piece of road if it ever came to that.
If it ever came to it, which historically one has never happened in all of the floods, one of the responses to my submission was saying that the evidence in Environment Southland is contrary to my assertion that climate change is not a risk to the road. The evidence that Environment Southland hold are all the photographs of all of the river levels and whether it broke its bank during all of the major flooding events that we've ever had, and it has never reached the river and all the flooding events. And obviously it's also a gravel sand base and it drains very, very well. So we aren't concerned about the possibility, but you're right. It could maybe in some natural land, at which point I think we'd probably just manage with our survival supplies until the road dries
You
out.
get there via pit road.
Yeah.
Tom,
So the clause that I think you believe puts you in a worse situation because it articulates sinking lid as you describe it, more than exists at the moment is, and I know you're familiar with the document, but it's basically clause number 11. It's only 2.5 lines and basically talks about the 21-year license plus 7+7. That's actually the only place in the document I think that actually refers to that.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, would you be more comfortable if that was removed, putting you back to your existing situation, which you believe to be better?
No, I don't. Neither of the two questions that you've asked are my position. My position is that I think what you passed in September 24 was very intentionally trying to do the best you could and you discussed this at length. It was not a sinking lid. That was the instruction from the Clare for the vote that resulted in the 21+7+7. So my position is that from September all the way through to now, I've never believed it to have been a sinking lid. But I can understand how when you take that sentence by itself, without the context that you all know of all the conversation that you had, and you're just a layman looking at it, it could be interpreted as a sinking lid. But I know the intent that you had when you passed it. So I don't believe it was, but I think there is an obligation there to clarify what your intent was, because it was a resolution that was changed on the fly, and the implications of the wording that we used wasn't as well considered as it perhaps should have been. And you can resolve from my perspective, you can resolve the issue of tenure and safety by simply passing 2 resolutions. If you want me to read them again, I can.
But just sorry if I can.
yeah, sure.
Just to pursue the same point, no, I mean, I think you and the previous 2 speakers have certainly said that you now feel yourself to be in a worse situation than you were before the change. I mean, maybe I misheard you, but that seems to be.
I'm not saying that.
I mean, and it's easily corrected by just removing that clause. So again, I'd ask you, would you rather we just removed that clause and went back to where we are?
No.
Thank you.
Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for a very thorough submission yet again.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you participating in the democratic process, as we all are around the table. My question was much along the same lines as the Mayor's around the road closure and restriction of access. Do you not see it a matter of public safety that, you know, when we get vandalism occurrences out there and potential for flooding, offshore earthquake, etc. We had one not too long ago that could potentially, emergency management stuff, tsunami and that sort of risk. Do you not see that having the ability for our team to be able to do that in case of emergency or in case of a car fire?
You've lost me at do that. What do you mean do that?
So to be able to have the ability to close off our road temporarily, etc. And that
temporarily is fine.
Yeah.
Temporarily is fine. Putting up concrete bollards and saying you can't go there anymore. No. That's what I mean by it. Because that's what the clause that still exists in the draft plan now.
Yeah.
Still says the policy is that we may reduce the roads or upgrade them depending on the budget.
Yeah.
But reduction, to my mind, is closing. Yeah, temporary closures in the event that they need to be closed. Like today, I had to plan around the aerial spraying that's happening because there's the potential for the road to be closed today.
Yeah.
Fine.
Okay, so it's I think I follow you. But permanent closure is your
permanent closure. Go out to the public and say, here's where we want to close. Here's why.
Yeah.
Here's the rationale. Be completely transparent about it.
Yeah.
And let the public tell you what they think. And then get approval. And if they
happy with temporary closure or diversion, but not happy with permanent closure.
Closing off access, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for your submission.
Very good. Thank you. Does anyone want a copy of? That's got the suggestions for that. Thank you.
Okay, Ken, we've got a series of minutes now that we're just working our way through. The first one is the minutes of the Bluff Communication Board held on the 28th of April.
Bluff Community Board, not the Communication Board.
No communication with Bluff, no.
Yeah, I'm happy to approve that. Just note, the public forum, Marcus Roy attended from Mountain Biking Club, and just I think we should acknowledge the significant efforts the Mountain Biking Club's done down in Bluff with the trails on Bluff Hill. It's a magnificent asset to the community.
Yep, thank you. Second, Barry, any discussion about those minutes? All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Minutes of the council meeting held on the 29th of April. Mover and seconded.
Quite a few,
Sorry?
because there's quite a few resolutions for those minutes, I'm
Yep.
really not to want to take them.
So, I'm moving Darren, seconded. Leslie, thank you. Any discussion about the minute? No? All those in favour?
Aye.
Yeah. Minutes of the hearing of the annual plan held on the 29th of April 25 and the 30th of April 25. Second for those. Trish, thank you. Second Darren, thank you. Any discussion about those hearing minutes?
Just a question, the submitters, particularly around the stormwater, those submitters have been followed up by staff. I think that was the commitment we made.
That's a question for the chief executive.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair, most of those have been, I think we're through the full list in relation to going back to the individuals in relation to each item, so.
Not been narrow on plan.
Yes, correct.
Any further questions? All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Minutes of the Community Wellbeing and Regulatory Committee on the 6th of May.
Move that they be received and recommendations adopted, and in moving that, because it includes the Sandy Point Domain Reserve Management Plan, I'd like to speak to it.
Certainly. I'll just get a second first.
I'll second that, just to put it
Thank
on
you,
the
Alice.
table.
Yep. And the floor is yours, Darren.
So there were two processes, and what we're seeing is, I'll stop short of muddying of the process, some confusion over the process around Cooper's Creek. And council made its decision on that last year. The role of the management plan is simply to reflect that decision. It is not putting it up for renegotiation. So that's the first point you need to bear in mind. Jeff made some really interesting points. I don't know how any council actually has a way of controlling how things are reported. But there's some really useful comments on in your submission I think we could probably follow up on, so thank you for that. Non-conforming is a resource management term that is not prohibited. That's the next step, which would not allow residents. Non-conforming means that it doesn't fit, but you can do things to make it fit. And so there's an explanation around that definition. To the point around the management plan, council has two options. Adopt it, or kick it out and start again. Bearing in mind that if you're talking about the issues that the residents of Coopers Creek that they made to us last year and that were made to us again during the submission process, those points well made and made again today. I mean, I didn't allow public forum at the last community wellbeing and regulatory because the points had already been made. It's another chance to make a submission. The mayor made a different determination and that's fine and I respect that. But you either adopt that or kick it out. Because the decisions that come from that sit in the recommendation were made by those that sat through the process. And if you didn't sit through the process, you don't get a chance to, at this point, tinker with it. You kick it out and you start again, bearing in mind that the management plan only recognises the decision around occupation that was made last year. It does not relitigate. I think there are some points around definitions that we could probably go back and tidy up at some later point, but that's the position that you're in now as a council. Do you adopt it or not? If it's not, you start again. If you adopt it, it goes forward. It is notified to the Minister of Conservation. It is not up to the staff to approve. It's just a case of we have to notify them of what the decision was. That's just process. Or you start again. And bearing in mind that'll be a process for the next council, but the management plan's reviewed every 10 years. I don't know that I'd do a more strategic overarching one first. Go straight to the management plan, but that's a decision that you get to make now. Either accept that recommendation or not. Timelines being what they are, it won't be this council that hears it. Thank you, Mayor Clark.
Thank you. Trish.
I'd like some clarification to what you just said, please, Darren. So in one thing you're saying, we thank you for this, the comments that Jeff has made. We can add those to it.
No, I didn't say that. I said there's stuff that we can look at tidying up later.
So
Particularly around, I guess the way it was reported, definitions of things. I'm not sure that the world's going to stop with them as they are. And as I say, there was the opportunity through the process to submit on those points.
through you, Chair, please, is there any way that we can add, for example, even the name of Cooper's Creek on the map?
You adopt it or not?
Okay, I'm just asking the question. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought I'd been clear.
No, it wasn't quite clear.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I said this before, the plan is conspicuously silent on Cooper's Creek. Now, it's a Sandy Point management plan. And if you have a settlement in there, I would expect a management plan to actually have quite a bit of detail about it. And because people are living there, it would show respect to the fact that they have properties there. So the fact it doesn't, I'm quite prepared to vote against this and wait until the next chance it comes up again.
Thank you. Alan?
Yeah, I'm sort of that. 17 people who this plan affects directly every day. And in my view, they're not really part of the plan. So we've got no choice, in my view, firmly believe, because of the 17 residences that are there. It's not 17 people, it's 17 residences. We're obliged by what we were saying before to actually not approve this plan as it is, and it needs to come back and it needs to be redone.
Mr. Chair, I think the fact that people are unhappy with how their particular situation is reflected in the plan applies to lots of organisations and people that are affected by this plan. It's part of the whole process that not everything can be worded exactly for everybody, and also it's part of the process that council sits and listens to competing points of view and comes to a position where they feel comfortable moving forward. Not all of us are comfortable with some of the decisions that have been made about some of what has been talked about today, but that's democracy. We have to accept that and move on. And I think for a a particular niche group of people to think that the plan should be designed around them is missing the fact that it's dealing with a vast range of issues which all have to be addressed in there, and there's only so much paper and there's only so much time that we have to give to wording every single person's point of view. Everybody was heard. Some people were heard, have been heard more than once. There has been due process. When the answer doesn't come out the way you want, we all have to be grown up about it and say, that's democracy, we have to move on. But we need to have a management plan for such an important piece of our backyard, in the case of Coopers Creek, their front yard. But for everybody that has a passion for that place, there needs to be some certainty to move forward. And I would be loath and really saddened if this council made a decision that delayed the implementation of this, when I personally know how much work has gone into this process. I think over time it will be tested, it will be refined. Not everything has to wait for a big 10-year change, but I think we need to have a starting point, and I would like to encourage my fellows around the table to see this as an opportunity to move forward.
Alex.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely feel for the Coopers Creek settlement, and I can absolutely see the point that the intent of how we had the discussions may have been reported differently and may not have come across to the community. And this council certainly didn't intend for that to happen, I don't think. But if we stop the management plan from moving forward now, you're halting everything else that this is addressed in our submission process. Like we've had our horse riding community come and speak to us. We've had our dog walking community come and speak to us. We've had multiple entities come along that have an interest in the wider of Sandy Park, Sandy Point, and Aridi Sands. It's not just Coopers Creek. And to Councillor Ludlow's point that non-conforming is a resource management terminology, it doesn't preclude them from being there, and we're not saying that we want to wipe them off the face of the earth. That's not what the intent is. It's a living document. Stopping it now or halting the process now means that we actually have to halt everything else that's in process that this pertains to, and start it all over again, in which we'll quite likely end up coming to the same result for quite a lot of it. So I think this council really does have an obligation to move forward, but also to Councillor Ludlow's point, there has been some issues raised today that we can absolutely look to including or changing the terminology for, or and clarifying the intent on.
Thank you, Tom.
Although Coopers Creek is clearly not the only thing that sits there, the reality is that it affects those individuals more than it affects the management plan, affects those individuals more than anybody else. I don't see how the work in the management plan has to be stopped. I mean, I would imagine the work will carry on as normal. I think it's clear that we have, through the series of presentations that we've had today, and also those that we had recently, it's clear that Coopers Creek residents are not happy with where we landed. And I think, therefore, that party we need to scrap and start again at some point in the future. So I would support, if the only choice we have is either rejecting the whole plan rather than the single paragraph has been explained, then I think I would support that we don't pass it today. And at some future point we bring back a document that is revised with respect to Coopers Creek at some point in the future.
Question of clarification. The document merely reflects the process you led.
Process what, sorry?
The outcome of the process you led.
Yeah, but I mean, we're allowed to listen to submitters.
Can I provide some advice?
Otherwise, why have them?
Mayor Clark.
Just giving some thought there, yeah.
Move it up here, or can you hear me from here?
We can hear you from there.
Unsurprisingly. Just some advice, please. I have in front of me the 7 or 8 pages of minutes from the September 2024 council meeting in which you passed the resolution, which is the wording in the reserve management plan. So to Councillor Ludlow's point, and to I suppose answer your question, Councillor Campbell, I agree with Councillor Ludlow that this recommendation from the Community Wellbeing Committee is in with respect to the Sandy Point Domain Reserve Management Plan, which involves and includes the exact wording of a resolution that this council made in October 2024. For that to change, for you now to change your view based on submissions which have been through the reserve management plan process, including submissions, consideration of those submissions, deliberations, and the final draft, which was put to the Community Wellbeing Committee, who, with that still in it, after listening to those submissions, who improved and endorsed the draft management plan to come to this council for final approval. If the council chooses to not accept the recommendation from the Community Wellbeing Committee, it leaves you with no choice but to, in Councillor Ludlow's words, I think it was kick it to touch or something similar, to start again with regards to the reserve management. This is a process matter. And one of the public, and again I wish to reiterate, it was a public forum presentation today. It wasn't a submission process. And there are 14 other licence holders in Coopers Creek who haven't been provided, or who, have not taken up a public forum option to resubmit today. So therefore, and one of those public forum presenters today mentioned a judicial review. This judicial reviews exist around process, not around decisions and whether people agree or disagree with the decision you make, but it's a review judicially of the process. So to Councillor Ludlow's point, his advice and his summation as the mover of the motion is very clear and specific. From a process perspective, you are only being asked today to either endorse and recommendations to council was that it endorses the Sandy Point Domain Reserve Management Plan as the approved plan to recommend for adoption, etc., etc. It's actually not a decision today about Coopers Creek. So I'm sorry, if you take this process and don't approve this and request staff to go back and re-litigate the Coopers Creek position to then be included in the next iteration of a reserve management plan, that will be the process. My recommendation would be that we would need to re-litigate what Councillor Campbell and I have done with the 17 individual meetings to bring back to include in the reserve management plan that particular part of the reserve management plan. So that would be my advice, is it's not like it's about whether you accept or not accept a recommendation from one of your committees, and if you don't, then we have to then reinitiate another process, not just about the reserve management plan, but about what is included in that, especially with respect to the Coopers Creek people and their requests and requirements, which we're getting to a different point on.
Say that again.
Process is significant here from respect for the respect of the council and a judicial review aspect.
Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councillor Ludlow's position on this matter, and I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail on that because it was quite clear, and I concur with the advice that Mr. Capel has just given. And I do want to mention a process point before we go any further. This is included in the minutes of the Community Wellbeing and Regulatory Committee of the 6th of May 2025. It's been moved and seconded. Unfortunately, Councillors Soper, Crackett and Kett were not present at that Community Wellbeing Committee meeting. We are all recorded in the apologies. Can I suggest that we have someone who was present at the meeting to replace seconding before we actually vote on this matter?
Yeah, I can do that. Trish, thank you. Alex?
Oh. Was that just me? Oh, no, my question was around process as well, after Rex's explanation on the process. To litigate a specific item under our standing orders, it can't be the exact same item for at least 6 months, is that correct? Yeah, so if we were to re-litigate that piece of, or the lease arrangement, you know, to clarify our intent of making sure that there wasn't a closing lid, we would have to wait 6 months to do so anyway. So, yeah, under our standing orders.
There's a process, councillor, that you would have to undertake to do so.
Correct.
But there's no process.
Well,
activated.
my understanding of that is we have yet to make a decision.
Yes,
on any of these issues yet. Once you make the decision, you then have a period where you can't relitigate it 5 minutes later. We haven't made the decision yet.
We made the decision in
We made the decision in September. Mayor Clark, sorry, can I just wrap up my clarification question? So what is to stop us from passing the plan itself so that we can give effect and we can steer our team in the right direction? We can give those other licensees the ability to come and present and to have another conversation around it on that portion of it, and once we kick off said process, but not preclude ourselves from moving on with the rest of the management plan. So why can't we pass the management plan through? Because there's nothing that prohibits it. There's nothing that actually stops Coopers Creek from existing as it is now. But then we can take the portion of it that it's clear that we would like to get clarification on and revisit that in conjunction with the 17 residents. So it doesn't stop either process from occurring.
Trace.
Just, sorry, it's the same question I think I'm asking, but I don't know if I've got the answer. If we pass this, and I'm in favour of it, this motion today, can the refinements as just identified by Darren, by Mr. Councillor Ludlow, can they be actioned soon?
Depends on your definition of soon.
Well, not for 10, I don't mean, I mean before 10 years.
Please, not across the table through the chair.
I beg your pardon. What I mean is, we were told if we put it aside, it's another whole process until we start the next round. But if we can pass this and make refinements after it's in place, if they could happen within, say, the end this term or the beginning of the next term of this council, that would go some way to meeting the needs of those people. I think, Alex, it's really what you've said as well.
Yes, it gives effect to that. But I think, if you don't mind, Chair, that you're wanting to clarify what that timeline could look like, so that we could expedite some of the concerns that we've heard.
Can I respond?
Okay.
Thank you. The answer is yes, maybe. But provided what you're doing is giving clarification, not changing direction. And it would be possible to bring a separate paper to Community Wellbeing and Regulatory, which would then come to council recommending those changes to the management plan for the purpose of clarification.
So then.
Timeline depends on how many, that's what I say. It could be before the end of the term if this.
Thank you.
So can we add to the recommendation resolutions?
Nope. It's yes or no. That's not me being.
No,
that's
just clarifying that. That's
process.
also, it's a yes or no.
Let's not have the debate across the table again.
So really, so as it is here, it is what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Right.
There is a third option. We'll come to that in a minute. Tom.
I was, I guess, going to pick up on a point that Alex made, that we could pass this, but then come back to look at I think one issue is that once we have passed it, and once it gets signed, then we would be going out offering those licenses to residents. So that would trigger that process then, residents being presented with, 21 plus 7 licenses. So we have to kind of make that choice. We cannot just.
That was your decision in September.
Doesn't matter.
No, let's not have the debate across the table. One speaker at a time. So I've sat here quite patiently now, and so one of the options that's available is that this recommendation could sit on the table. And that's another option. It doesn't have to be decided today. Right, hang on, Councillor, you can shake your head in a minute. So that's one option. I'm quite clear about what we committed to in September, October 2024, which Jeff referred to. And I can specifically remember, and I'll go back to my notes to clarify that we did say to them that the 21 plus 7 plus 7 did not limit the ability for the leaseholders to apply for a further period. It did not put a cap on it. Now, the key in what Jeff has said, and he's quite right, does not prevent seeking a further period. That doesn't guarantee that you get a further period, but it means you can ask for it. And that, I remember saying that at the time, and I don't know why we are stuck on this management plan going through with 2 simple recommendations that Jeff has suggested would resolve the issues that the licence holders have, which is 1, in the licence to occupy does not prevent seeking a further period, so that's beyond the 21 plus 7 plus 7, and 2, the ability to transfer section 1, which is if you sell your licence, the person that inherits it gets that ability to seek further time. Doesn't mean you get it, but it just means that you don't have a finite date at the end of 35 years when everything disappears. Now, I don't know why we can't have that inserted, and it concerns me that there's little or no reference to Coopers Creek in this management plan, because regardless of what Rex said about walking a dog and riding a horse, and people coming in to submit on that, that is insignificant when it comes to the security of people who have residences on the reserve. Well, that was the tone of it. It can't be downplayed. I mean, I walk a dog out there, and my rights to walk a dog on the reserve has nothing to do with the security of the people that have houses out there. So I think as a council, we need to make sure that we have a mechanism in place that 1, recognises Coopers Creek, and 2, goes down those 2 suggestions that Jeff has suggested. I think there's 1 of 2 ways of doing that. One is we leave it on the table at the moment, and it doesn't have to go back to square one and start all over again, because I don't think anybody at Coopers Creek who's not in this room today would have any objection to 35 years plus a potential right of renewal or the ability to seek some further time. I can't see anybody being opposed to that. And Tom, you can clarify if that's not the case. It just seems to me that if we can't do that today, then we need to, if we approve the plan, we need to have a mechanism in place that does not get lost in the process. And I just can't understand how we have a management plan for such a significant area that doesn't acknowledge Coopers Creek in it. And if I was at Coopers Creek, I'd feel a bit left out of the process on that. So that's my penny's worth. Michael.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair. I want to bring council back to two decisions. Council's actually in a position at the moment where it is seeking to overturn a decision of council. The plan itself is reflective of decisions council has already made. I want to be very clear on that. They are decisions that have been made in relation to building through the process. That process then, which is the management plan process, has then been built off decisions council has made. What's before you today is the management plan. The decision in relation to Coopers Creek was September 2024, and I would highlight to council that that requires that decision to be overturned. That overturned in relation to that decision is something that is not necessarily part of the plan, because you would be going right back to have to overturn that and then start your whole planning process again, based on the fact that you have now got a new decision in relation to that. That is a whole new planning process. It goes back to the start in relation to the management plan, should you do that. So the position today is, do you want to overturn a previous council decision in relation to Coopers Creek, not whether you're going to, if you are going to decline the management plan from that perspective. So want to be very clear, they are two separate items. One is around Coopers Creek, which was a precursor to going through the planning process. And if you are going to go down that one, it is the process of that. What my executive member highlighted was that is what would give a cause to a judicial review, is if you don't follow that process, that's what's at risk. I'm not giving you advice on what you should do from a council perspective, except to follow the correct process in relation to that. If you want to go down that process, I'm suggesting you will need to look at that particular recommendation to make an overturn in relation to that position.
Again, you can help me with this, Michael. In relation to September 2024, I am absolutely clear that we gave a commitment to the Coopers Creek people that the license to occupy, which was 21 plus 7, and the 21 was based on advice that we got from management, that to push the 21 beyond that period, we would come up against the conservation minister or the department, that would be seen to be precedent setting. So we intentionally set 21 plus 7 plus 7. We gave a commitment that did not preclude or prevent them seeking a further period. And if that's the commitment we gave, where does that sit on the management plan? Like to answer that?
I can through self-chair. So those commitments that you expressed were made are in relation to the discussions that happened into that particular meeting. I can only take account in relation to the forward actions in relation to the resolutions that were passed by council. Any discussions that happen within those discussions are noted minutes in relation to the discussion. The resolution is what stands. I'll get a copy of that resolution so I can read it out for you. Just wait.
If you want it,
yes, please. If you could read that out, please.
yes. So it was moved, Councillor Ludlow, seconded Councillor Bond. The council approves the recommended approach for future tenure agreement at Coopers Creek to be included in the draft Sandy Point Domain Management Plan 9.3 building section, specifically 9.3.2.11, to read a 21-year licence to occupy with a right of renewal of 7 years plus 7 years, with the right to transfer to a third party for the remaining period to a maximum of 35 years. The motion was put and it was passed.
So, second question for you, Michael. What's the legal requirement, the time frame for overturning a decision? If we made a decision and wish to revocate that decision, 6 months?
I'll look to my legal just to the left of you.
So while he's looking for that, I guess my reflection of that is that if we have in good faith made a decision that with hindsight didn't reflect where we wanted to be. We've got to be brave enough to revocate or to do something to repair that. Because while I've got the hands, while we've got the issue put in front of us of a potential judicial review, who's going to make the judicial review? Well, I don't think, from what I know, anybody at Coopers Creek is going to legally challenge us on that issue, because that opens the door that we don't have the sinking lid that finishes 35 years from now. So if we're talking about our ratepayer stakeholders, we are not disadvantaging them. If we pursue this, then we potentially do have it. You had the people today, I think it was Kerry was saying that that there's a potential for a review, judicial review, because we've breached the original conditions they had for the leaseholders. If we haven't got this right, then we need to be brave enough to repair it. And so I'm happy to get advice from management or from my colleagues about how we do that. But I can't support this recommendation if it just leaves it unattended to. Now, the recommendation that Rick read out, with hindsight, from my position, was not a good result. It made a sinking lid that at 35 years, basically all the properties had to go. Now, if that's our wish, then that's our wish. If it's not our wish, then we need to repair that. Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My point was going to be that I don't believe we're talking about a revocation at all.
No.
We're talking about an amendment to the September 2024 resolution. We are not talking about a revocation. None of what I've heard around the table, except your reference to revocation, was indicating that anybody saw a revocation of September 2024 as a sensible path. The conversation as I saw it was more councillors expressing the view that it would be possible to pass today the recommendation on the management plan, but as a separate issue, re-look at the status of the September 2024 recommendation on Coopers Creek, and for council to consider a possible amendment to that position. That may be a mere addendum that went with that resolution, that expressed what several councillors have said was their understanding, that it gave the licensees the ability to ask for a further term, but no one to me was talking about a revocation.
Let me comment to that. My understanding is once council, I'm not talking about committees here, I'm talking about council, which has decision-making authority, accepts a recommendation, that is a decision made by council. If we want to change that decision, we have to revocate. You have to go back and say, we got that wrong. You can't make amendments, because we could make amendments every single council meeting for the next 10 years and we'd never get anything done. It's my understanding that there is a time frame which, if you make a decision, and we made that on September or October 2024, that we cannot just go back and amend it. So I'll take some advice from you, Michael.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through you. So the process to revoke or alter a resolution is set out in standing orders and requires a notice of motion to be filed to formally do so. There is a 6-month period, but any resolution of council from the beginning of its term, or indeed any earlier council, can be revoked or altered by that process. So a notice of motion signed by a member and brought forward to a committee, to the council meeting, would achieve that. Putting it on the table for discussion by the council to alter or revoke any resolution.
Okay.
So can I ask a question around
No, I just want to get some clarification on that. So if I lodge a notice of motion for the next council meeting, which is a month away,
It would have to go back to community wellbeing first.
No.
This would be for
Remember
Cooper's
that
Creek.
the decision is made at council. If I put the notice of motion in for that, and it's successful, what happens to the management plan thereafter?
The management plan, and the point I made at the beginning is it will always only reflect the decision of council. And so if council, through a notice of motion, and I caution you, word it carefully because you don't get the chance to make amendments once it's lodged.
Yeah, I understand that.
When the notice of motion goes through, and if a change to that original decision is made, then the wording in the management plan will alter to reflect that. Will need to be altered to reflect that. And again, that's a change that comes with a paper, with a clarification that council has changed. And so again, it's that same process that I talked about to your question, Trish. Putting it on the table carries a real risk of the judicial review. Because I come back to, you have only two choices: accept or not. Bearing in mind that this is just a document for the management of the Sandy Point domain, not the issue around the Coopers Creek settlement. The management plan will change if you change the conditions around that decision from September. So please, again, don't confuse the two processes. You want to go through Sandy Point, the Coopers Creek issue again, fine, do it through a notice of motion. But it actually doesn't have an effect on this process. Yes or no, maybe doesn't work. Maybe is when your process starts to trip you up, and that's when a judicial review happens. And as Rex said, we're all just about the process at this point. Understand the issues that we've heard and passionately put, as always, but that's a separate issue to the management plan.
So can I ask?
No, I haven't finished yet, sorry. I just need to get this sorted in my mind. So the relationship of the issue of the leaseholder arrangements. Are you saying they don't need to be in the management plan?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying whatever arrangements council makes, we will reflect that in the management plan.
Even if it's adopted now.
Yes.
So adopted.
If it's adopted now, we alter and you
Notice
change the
motion comes
conditions.
forward, change the decision.
Another paper comes forward to change how that's reflected in the management plan.
It gets implemented.
Similar to amendments.
Can I ask
to-
something about that?
No, I just want to clarify again. I'm not quite 100% sure. So what I'm saying is, does the arrangement with the leaseholders have to be reflected in a management plan? Could we adopt this plan? I can move a notice of motion at a following meeting, which changes the lease arrangements that we were previously agreed on, which is October last, which we're now 6 months past. Can we change those? And does that change need to go into the plan, or can it just sit as a leasehold arrangement?
So you'd have to do that as a separate process.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not insurmountable. It's simply, if we adopt the management plan today, and at the next meeting, a notice of motion comes forward and changes those lease arrangements, and that's accepted by council. At the following meeting, there's a paper that comes through saying this is the change that needs to be reflected in the management plan.
Okay.
So to clarify that, does the management plan need to clarify what the agreement councils or the agreed to around the leaseholds at Coopers Creek, or is it separate?
No, it just reflects council's decision.
Now, but then it would get changed once we changed our decision.
Yeah, no, but
Well,
he's
surely, sorry.
Yeah. So does the management plan, so if there's a decision made, a notice motion comes for a decision made, does that decision then need to be reflected in the management plan?
Okay, I thought I just answered that, so I'll have another crack.
Yeah.
If the notice of motion comes forward.
Yeah.
And it successfully passes through council at the next meeting.
Yeah.
That means a paper can come forward to the meeting after that, saying that the following changes need to be made to the management plan because of a change in the
Yeah, but
lease policy.
I understand the process, but my question is, does the agreement that the council makes on the leaseholders, the decision the council makes on the leaseholders, does that need to be included in the management plan, or can it set aside from the management plan?
No, it needs to be included.
It needs to be included, right, okay, thank you.
So may I ask about process?
Sure.
Isn't it the case that the management plan, once passed here, goes to the minister for approval?
No, it goes to the minister to receive.
Acknowledge.
We send them a copy.
So there is no approval required by them anymore? So we are the final arbiter?
Jeff raised that when he spoke. We have delegated authority.
But we do have to provide a copy of the plan to the minister.
So, but, well, okay, it's the same thing then. I mean, can you modify it after, that was my point.
Oh, so let's say this is received today, we send a copy to the minister. And if there's a process that means that there is a change, then we send the altered, the revised document to the minister. They only just ever receive it as a copy.
Yep, Barry.
With notice of motion, I'm quite prepared to back the notice of motion and pass.
Well, we're not discussing it.
I
We have a motion on the
what we're
table and you can't take anything else.
We know what's coming.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Alex.
No, I think I'm comfortable with where we've got. I don't want to drag the conversation on anymore. It's just Councillor Ludlow has definitely demonstrated that we kind of just do need to separate both processes.
Yeah.
The management plan's going to, can continue, and alteration or revocation or having another crack at trying to sort this out can happen as a simultaneous process. So I think that's the right way to move forward.
Thank you. Leslie?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Councillor Ludlow has articulated the position very much as I was intending to say, or repeat in a slightly different form, since some didn't appear to understand it the first time. Basically, there is a process we have to very carefully follow. A notice of motion to alter, and I would suggest it is to alter, not revocate and replace, because revocation and replacement will be a much lengthier pathway we do not have to go down. When the notice of motion can be to alter, can be made. That is quite separate from what we are discussing at the moment, which is the passing of the minutes of community wellbeing with the recommendation on the management plan as part of that.
Okay, right.
Yeah, just one other point that was raised, the acknowledgement of Coopers Creek within the document. Is that amendment able to be made to the plan, or does that require a whole?
I guess it's a point of clarification.
Yeah.
So it can be considered as part of
It's nothing new.
No.
Coopers Creek isn't just material.
No, that's right. But I mean, it's recognised.
So I guess in some of the points of clarification that could come forward that could form part of it.
Thank you.
Form part of the notice of motion.
No. God,
separate.
Trish, they're two separate things.
Yeah.
Helen.
Do that again and you'll stand in the corner.
Okay.
I'm just going to say,
It's you, Ellen.
one of the other things that we're forgetting here again, I mean, I understand about what we're doing with the things, but the other thing I fail to understand is why there's so little mention of them in this particular document. Of the fact that there are civilian residences at Coopers Creek. You've got a whole plan here of 100-odd pages and whatnot, and there's so little mention of that and them, yet so much information about everything else. And I'd say that some of those other things that I mentioned, more largesse, are far less important. So I just can't understand why the document doesn't particularly mention more about Coopers Creek as a community. So that's the reason I'm probably going to vote against.
So, now just a question from me. So I just want to be clear on the notice of motion. I understand, which goes down the line that Jeff was suggesting, but getting some mention of the Coopers Creek community being in the overall plan. How does that take place?
I guess in a paper that comes forward to recommend points of clarification, it forms part of that. I mean, we don't need to tell the complete story
No.
of
We're happy with
Cooper's
everything
Creek.
else.
Sorry, I've got the floor.
Yep.
Sorry, yours, Martin.
The point I heard you make is that the Cooper's Creek residences are significant. But actually, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, it's actually a very small part of the Sandy Point domain and the activities that go on there. So should there be acknowledgement of its existence and specifically labelled? Yes. Okay. But I'm not sure to what extent you want to go to. But the crucial point around what it is the residents are looking for is off to the side. That's the other thing that will form part of the notice of motion, and it's around the terms of their leases and that with council. Some clarification of the acknowledgement that Cooper's Creek exists and the name can form part of that document that will come forward to, following on from some of the suggestions of Jeff earlier.
Okay. All right. A move and second.
Yes, Councillor Ludlow and Councillor Boyle have moved and seconded, but they've moved all three, so the minutes, recommendations for Sandy Point and the recommendation for Mokumoko. I would suggest, Mayor Clark, that you
We'll do Sandy Point separately.
Yes.
So that's just the one recommendation. So people are clear that at the next meeting, I'll put a notice of motion up. That goes down the line.
Do the minutes first?
Right.
Do the minutes first?
Yeah, so but people understand that in voting.
It's important.
That this is not an all or nothing type vote. It's we still have a mechanism available to us, which is the notice of motion, to resolve the issues that have been thrown up today by the licence holders. So we've got a adoption, endorses the Sandy Point Domain Management Plan as the approved plan. And I think the next part of the recommendation doesn't seem to fit anymore, which is to recommend for adoption by the Department of Conservation, because actually we've got the delegated authority, haven't we?
It fits with their process. We send it to them, they adopt it. It's just their terminology. It's like non-conforming.
Okay. All right, put that motion in. All those in favour?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Aye. Rangi and Alan, both wanted it recorded. Yep. Rangi, recorded.
Yes, please, we stoned if you go to Chisholm.
Yep, thank you. Okay, on to Mokumoko Reserve verification process. And that has one recommendation: to cease the verification process and continue with the current management of grazing through a lease arrangement. Recommended outcome. Somebody like to move that? Yeah. Yeah. Trish, thank you. Any discussion about that?
Point of clarification,
Certainly.
it's after the meeting, it came to my attention that we have assumed that there was actually a leasehold arrangement on that land. And I'm not sure that that is actually accurate. So can I clarify that?
Your clarification is that there currently isn't. This resolution will require a lease arrangement to be conferred or signed and confirmed.
Thank you, because I think sometime during the conversation that we had, there was an impression given that the land was leased by somebody, and that is actually not the case. Council is not in receipt of any income off that land at this point.
It's been grazing. Yeah, it's free grazing.
Indeed. However, just so that the record truly reflects what the situation is. Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, any further discussion on that? No, all those in favour?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No?
If we're talking about the moment of
Yes.
location
Yes.
as a separate issue, then yes, I would like my opposition recorded as opposed.
So you're opposed, yep, thank you. All right, on to item 8.
We still need to receive the minutes, Mayor Clark.
Oh, sorry, yes, that was my mistake, yep.
Seconded.
Seconded by Alex, all those in favour? Carried.
Apart from Alex?
Thanks, Steve. Steve.
So, councillors, just in regards to the minutes that you've just passed, a clarification has been requested relating to Rangers attendance at Sandy Point. There was a reference in there, the Rangers were there on site for 16 hours a day. Well, we can't amend the minutes because they have been confirmed by the Community Wellbeing Committee. It's related to the hearing. Actually, what that should say is that there were Rangers. So there is a team of Rangers, and between the team of Rangers, they would spend up to 16 hours a day across, not just a Ranger. So I had indicated to the person who raised that on the public that I would address that today. Thank you, Mayor Clark.
Well, moving on to the minutes of the Infrastructure and Projects Committee held on the 13th of May. Two recommendations. I move that.
Infrastructure.
Yeah, aren't we going to deal with the other? Haven't we dealt with the other?
Yep.
We've dealt with that.
Yep, we dealt with
I'll
that.
second the
We did it first.
Yep, so that's Leslie's a segment. Any discussion about the recommendations, which is the service delivery model?
Yeah.
No, there being none, I put the motion then. All those in favour?
Aye.
Minutes of the extraordinary meeting, council on the 13th of May. Thank you, Darren.
Seconded.
Second to Leslie. Any discussion about those minutes? No, there being none. All those in favour?
Aye.
Yes. Carried. Minutes of the Finance and Policy Committee.
Moved.
Thank you, Leslie. Second. Grant, yes. Any discussion around those minutes?
Mr. Chair, oh, sorry, I might be on the wrong page. My apologies.
Yep, okay. So that comes with a recommendation, which is the 2024-25 Q3 performance report. Groups of budget adjustments outlined in schedule, changes to the plan in the third quarter report, and then has a suite of other policies in 7 and 8. Be mindful that I've already declared to each of you that I will not table 7.6, which is the revised procurement policy. So we're voting on the others. Yeah, Leslie.
On the objection, Mr. Mayor, on what basis have you advised the recommendation number 6 to council from the meeting and will not be proceeded?
Yep, because as the chair of this committee, of this council, I have an ability to leave recommendations on the table. I've clarified that with our legal advisor. That was one of the options I had. The other option is just to leave the whole minutes from that committee on the table. I wasn't prepared to do that because there are other things that need to go through. But I've had a number of feedback from a number of councillors who said that they are uncomfortable about the provision within the procurement policy that talks about diversity data. And so I'm seeking to have a meeting with Michael and his team about what the implications of those are. And,
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, but I've asked if you can specify the standing order under which you have elected not to present that recommendation from the committee to this council, because I cannot see a standing order that gives you the ability to do that on a recommendation that was passed 6-1 at that committee meeting after extensive discussion.
Yep. So I've got a response back from Michael Morris that says you can leave the recommendation on the table but receive the overall minutes. This leaves the policy waiting for some further stage. I'll ask Michael to respond if that's not the case.
Standing Order 15.1, it gives the chair the authority to direct the agenda, the recommendation coming from the minute as part of the minutes, as part of the agenda. And as such, the mayor, as the chair, has that ability. in relation to the setting of the agenda for the meeting.
Can I ask
Thank you.
where the recommendation comes back to then?
Sorry?
Where does the issue come back to then?
I would assume, and I might be being told otherwise, it would come back to the next full council meeting.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I, as Chair of the Finance and Policy Committee, I would like to point out that Standing Order 15.1 says the chairperson of any meeting may include on the agenda for that meeting a chairperson's recommendation regarding any item brought before the meeting. The purpose of such a recommendation is to focus debate.
Yep.
I do not see that you are intending to focus debate, which could take place today with the action you are taking, and therefore I am calling into question the process you are suggesting. Why cannot this issue be debated today? It has been fully debated and discussed at the committee meeting who has brought forward this recommendation, as I would like to point out, with 7 voting members of that committee in place, 6 of whom voted for the recommendation, only 1 of whom opposed that recommendation. And I can quote from that meeting, one councillor said, having raised the issue, I have made my point, happy to move on, not going to hold up the reasoning. A second councillor said, I did hang my hat on the fact that it won't form part of the decision on tenders. Staff were asked those questions very closely at committee and were informed that the request on the documents would be carefully explained as information collecting, having no effect on the decision of tenders. Therefore, I cannot see that there is any reason why a majority recommendation from a committee should not be passed at this meeting.
That's my call as the chair, and as Michael Morris has said on this under section 15.1, I have the right to leave it on the table for further debate.
And what I'm saying, Mr Chair, is that I do not believe you are using that 15.1 standing orders appropriately in this particular case. If you are saying that some councillors, after the meeting where this was fully discussed, have gone behind the chair's back and raised issues of which I am unaware, that puts a very different complexion on this matter that I take very seriously, and I believe there has been an attempt to usurp process. And I am laying on the table very firmly that I do not believe this is an appropriate use of the democratic process of this council or of our standing orders to delay this matter.
Welcome to have that view.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support Councillor Soper, Chair of the Finance Committee, and I'm actually going to quote 25.2 of our standing orders, where this was made by a delegated authority given to a committee. So 25.2 completely overrides whatever section 15.1 you're trying to say. And sorry, we have to go by our standing orders. And I believe, personally, after much research in the last couple of days, that you do not have the ability to hold that on the table, because it completely, as Councillor Soper said, undermines the democratic process. It was moved by Councillor Ludlow, second by myself, voted on, and if we're going to sit back with every decision we make at a committee level and wonder if it's ever going to see the day of light when it comes to council, then what are we here for? I mean, that is the time it gets done at committee level. If you read 5.3.4 in our governance statements, it clearly states that the Finance and Policy Committee has that delegation. So, sorry, Chair, if this goes through, it's a sad day for council and its democratic process.
Point of clarification, Mayor Clark, I'm not sure that the committee actually had delegated authority.
It does, it says that. It says that.
Council has final decision making.
Well, if you read.
Committees make recommendations to council.
If you read 5.3.4, it clearly says that the Finance and Policy Committee is the delegation of approving financial spending. So it's written down, the word delegation is used.
Well,
I think there are two questions. The first one is whether you as mayor or council have got the right to take the action that you have that authority. You've sought advice from the manager of governance, who we seek that advice from, and you've been told that you do have that authority and you've acted on that.
Yep.
A separate question I think it's been raised is whether that was a correct judgment, but that's a different matter. That's a matter of judgment, which is, yours to make. But the fundamental question is, do you have the authority? And you've got the advice from Mr. Morris, which is, I think, repeated now, is that you do. Whatever other paragraphs people might quote, we have the advice that you do have that authority.
And again, I'll just reiterate, I'm not trying to stop a decision being made. I just want to have some more discussion with staff, because I think that when you ask for somebody to tender for a job with this council or to provide services or goods, when you start asking them about diversity, but in the same breath you say you're not going to take that into account, that will be seen by some people who will tender in the filter, which is a way of screening who you do or don't approve. If that's not the case, then why ask it? Alex.
Hey, look, I really feel uncomfortable with this, like Councillor Soper. Yep. When we look at procurement, on one hand, this council's asking for social outcomes to be included in procurement options at a ratepayer cost, yet we're revolting against just collecting data for diversity. It's absolutely hypocritical, and I don't understand how
Let me clarify something for you. We are not asking for the data.
But we're asking whether or not they do
keep data.
Yes, exactly. It's even less of an issue.
Well, why would you ask for it? If you don't want the data for any purpose, why would you ask somebody for data?
To know whether or not they do.
They're not required to.
Doesn't matter whether or not they're required to. It's part of what we're asking for them to do.
Well, no, that's a different ballgame again, because we're not asking them to keep data. Because with when it was discussed at the committee level, the staff advice was, we're going to ask the question, but we're not going to use it for any purpose, and we're not going to ask for the information that they may be collecting. We don't want the information. We just want to know where they're collecting. Is it our role to encourage people that might be tendering for us, which will be predominantly companies, to then have to feel as though they have to collect data on diversity? And do we actually collect it ourselves? Because I've never seen it.
It is my understanding that we do, Mayor Clark.
Yep, sure. But anyway, all I was wanting to do is to go back to Michael and his team and to clarify how this might be perceived, and then bring the decision forward.
Am I allowed to respond?
Sure.
Well, my perception, and I'm sure some of the community's perception, will be that you can't have one standard for social procurement and then treat diversity with a different lens. We're not asking for the information to be provided to us. We're not looking at crossing any privacy boundaries. We are just using it as an ability to know whether or not the entity is collecting that data for themselves, is my understanding.
Well, I don't see how you can correlate those two things. If you are talking about social good, we don't ask people to show you social good unless they want to access the provision that we have under the procurement policy of up to $300,000 per year per contract. So they would then have to show. So if you think about Recycle South as a good example, if you wanted to access the provisions that we have in there for social good, you'd have to show some data of how you're doing. But we're just talking about general procurement. If we want if we want to ask somebody to dig up the road and put some pipes in, why do they have to indicate to us that they're holding or collecting diversity data, which is not social good, it's diversity. Diversity is all about the makeup of your workforce, males versus females, ethnic issues.
I think you and I have probably got significantly different views on what diversity is. In fact, Mayor Clark, because it's actually really
what is diversity?
quite broad. But I think it may be better if we just leave that there, respectfully.
Good.
Diversity, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Is a really sexy word globally at the moment, which I think is being misconstrued in many quarters. But diversity is actually something that we already embrace and favour as a council in a contract that we have awarded for our recycling.
That is inherently diversity.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, well, firstly noting legal advice around your ability to leave this on the table, this particular thing. The second thing, I left the meeting last week and did probably have a reflection of the fact that we, and I've got to be careful here, why we ask for information that's not important to the contract? And so I just think it needs to be clarified, and therefore I support the decision to leave it on the table and have a discussion around it so that we can be very clear as what are we actually trying to achieve through our procurement policy. Why ask for information that we're not really interested in? Why have it as part of a tender process? Because I do believe that someone who is giving consideration to tendering for a council contract would take that not with the intent that we're proposing it, but would look at that through the eyes of, okay, we need to, or this may discount us from this if we don't have this information or can't provide this information or some such matter. So I'm supportive of the Mayor's perspective around, I think we need to have a greater discussion around it and get more clarification from staff around it and land on a place where we are really, really clear that what our procurement policy, how it gives effect to our tender process. And so that's why I'm interested in a discussion. I did vote for the motion at the committee level, but on reflection, I think we just need to have real clarity around this because this is a big part of how we do business with our community, and we just need to be really clear on it so we don't have unintended consequences like we've just had in the previous discussion. There's a bit of how was it intended around the Coopers Creek thing, and people have interpreted it one way and others interpret it another. So it does happen, and I think we need to have a real robust discussion to make sure we get this right.
This is about process. It's no reflection of the way the committee was run, which was excellently done. The Mayor has used his right to hold this over, and I don't think there's any further discussion to it.
Thursday.
I believe the Deputy Mayor had indicated he wanted to speak before me.
I'm sorry.
No, you spoke to your hand before me.
No, we didn't have this one.
Okay.
Deferring to you.
Okay. I mean, look, we seem to have gone to the substance of the matter somewhat, which, but I believe that when you put out a tender document, we need to satisfy ourselves that the companies who respond are complying with the law of the land and are complying with the tender conditions. To put some sort of additional moral overlay on that, just reflecting the views of this council, in my view, is inappropriate. However appropriate they are, to put that kind of moral overlay over it, I think is inappropriate. But I can absolutely assure you, somebody who's responded to many, many contract tenders in my time, if it's included in the document, it will be assumed that it will be taken into account. Even if we say that it will not, they will assume that it will be taken into account. Otherwise, why would they ask?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I do not accept that Standing Order 15.1 has been used appropriately in this case. In this particular case, I believe it is an attempt to usurp the correct process democratically of council by a member who was an apology for the meeting, and that this is now, and it has been further strengthened by at least two of the speakers who have spoken recently. What I am seeing now is that there is an attempt post a meeting where a vote was taken and a majority vote passed. There is now an attempt to re-litigate the matter after the meeting. This sets a dangerous precedent for council where anybody can go away after a meeting in which they have fully participated at committee level and voted on the matter, and then decide on reflection that they would like a different outcome. I am not prepared as the chair of a committee to support that this is a practice this council should accept. We had a full and frank discussion that covered all the issues that have been raised at the committee level. We had further advice and close questioning of staff on the very issues that have now been raised. We then had a vote where the chairperson waited to see if there was anyone around the table who was going to suggest an amendment. That did not happen. The vote was taken. Of the 7 voting members present, 6 voted for the motion, only 1 voted against. We now have a declaration that at least 1 member has gone away and rethought their position and wants this re-litigated. And it appears that the Mayor's decision supports re-litigation of a matter fully discussed at committee level. I strongly protest at this abuse of council's process. And I urge council to consider all the minutes of the Finance and Policy Committee meeting that was held on the 20th of May today.
For me, there's 2 things. There's the process. I support Councillor Soper. I think that such a resounding decision merits a little bit more consideration perhaps than I'm seeing. But there is also the procurement policy, which is under discussion. We were asked earlier today to bear in mind a particular matter in our procurement policy. And there was a lot of, it seemed to me, a lot of support for the position that was being proposed. It's not dissimilar to what we have taken on other malefactors in parts foreign, about precluding them from doing business. In terms of the procurement policy, we would then be asking whoever provides goods and services to us whether they do business with any of those entities. There's a list of what the United Nations has. There's actually a much fuller list, which includes, as I understand it, people like Hewlett Packard and, there are a number of lists going around that people are being urged to not do business with on the basis of support for justice for Palestine. Now, we listened to that conversation. There were people nodding their heads. There were people at this table. We haven't had it put to us yet, but that would be then something that you would add to your procurement policy, whether or not it was legislated by government. Now, over many years, there have been measures implemented by government to identify diversity in the name of equity and inclusion. And we as a council have practiced that ourselves. We obtained contracts in the past based on those very questions. Hanua put them to us when we were tendering for shovel ready and those sorts of things. We need to actually be mindful that that is how we show our community that every person in our community is valued, whether you be a low-paid worker or a chief executive of a business, whether you be somebody who has never been in employment, or whether you are in employment that makes accommodations for your different ability, whatever that might be. We would not have made the progress to where there is a significant number of the executive leadership team in our council who are women who have children. Because once upon a time, when I started work here, if you got married, you were expected to trundle off into oblivion, and you were never given a responsible job, and you were not provided with superannuation. We would consider that to be outrageous now. If we don't look at what our expectations are of the people with whom we do business, we are doing a disservice to all those who get left out of the statistics, who are never counted for anything because nobody takes the number. Now, it may be that at some time in the future, we may be interested in how many of the people who work for our roading contractors are actually female. We may be interested in how many of them have hearing conditions or similar things, not for anything other than we may need to make better safety and health provisions for them as they are working. Because just as the contracting employer has an obligation, so do we. So it's not irrelevant whether those statistics are collected. It's not irrelevant whether we actually use them or not. It's that we stand up in public meetings and say to people, we want to be a community that looks like this. We need to be the example that we expect to see reflected back at us. It's a small thing. It costs nothing. If any contractor feels disadvantaged by the fact that we ask the question, they need to be looking in the mirror. Because this, I don't think this is an unusual request in 2025. It was in 1965. I would be sad if we chose to return there, or even further back to 1935, before the Second World War, when women were man-powered, if you'll pardon the expression, to do tasks that were normally done by men. We have moved a long way as a society, and it's because of collecting information. So can we please not cloud what it is that we are asking of people? If they have the information, then we get to see it. If they haven't got the information, they may wonder why they don't have the information and look at themselves. But I don't think it's going to stop anybody putting in a contract for Invercargill City business. So with all due respect, it's Kurumatawa, I understand that that standing orders would appear to give you the power to do it, but is that the wisest thing that we could be doing? Especially given the amount of time we have taken relitigating so many things today, we will be looking at relitigating this in at least a month's time, if not 2 months' time. Thank you.
So as a response to that, you just reinforced exactly the reason why I'm going back to seek some advice from council management, because, and I'll quote you, you say, we have obligations to ensure diversity. Well, actually, we do not have that. I could go to a roading company, which you said, and say to them, do you hold diversity data? They can say yes, and that tells me nothing. The company might have 90 men and 1 female. but they still collect the data. So the data doesn't do anything. And council management have already said they do not want to see the data. They just want to know that it's being collected. So data in its own right achieves no outcome. But anyway, I think we've come to the end of this discussion. Sorry, guys. I know you've got further hands up. We'll be here all day. I just want to clarify that the advice I'm given by Michael Morris is that I have a right to leave a recommendation on the table. The reasoning for that is purely so that I have some time to talk to Michael and his team about the issue of diversity data and why we're asking that. And as Tom said, it will be seen by the community as a filter. They're my words. I'm not attempting to relitigate because, again, committees do not make decisions. So it's not changing a decision, they just make a recommendation. And before that recommendation is put by me as the chair of this council, I want to get some further advice, and they have an absolute right for that. If somebody wants to subsequently challenge that, you're welcome to do that. But the challenge will no longer be at this meeting. So again, I'll just reiterate that I'm putting the suite of recommendations through 6, 7 and 8, with the exception of 7.6.
Just a point of order, Chair. You talked about a challenge. If a challenge was submitted post this meeting,
sure, and
the decision that comes back from a higher power says that you were not correct in doing what you did, so what would be the outcome there? Well, I ask that.
I guess I'd have to be very careful in future of using powers that I'm advised that I've got, which I might add chairs of committees have got as well, to leave something on the table. I'm not attempting to remove the decision making. All I'm trying to do is delay it to make sure that we get the right decision.
Excuse me.
Now, if management come back and say to us they still want to do it, then I'll put that up. If I was wanting to relitigate it, I would purely vote against the recommendation.
Well,
No.
I'm going to vote against the receipt of these minutes, just in principle, and the fact that I do not believe that this process is being run correctly. I think it's an absolute perversion of democracy, and it's my right as a member to do so.
That's fine. You can vote against all the number we've got, 2, 4, 5, 6 recommendations if you want to.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
I am also going to unsurprisingly vote against, because I think and I have declared quite firmly that this is a complete perversion of the process, and this is egregious action. It is inappropriate use of 15.1 of standing orders. I strongly suggest that if there is any mayor in this country who believes that this is an appropriate use of 15.1, that it is well past time that our standing orders were revised to make it clear that such egregious use is not appropriate under 15.1. I challenge you completely on the seeking of further information that was done at the committee level. Everything that you have stated you wish to seek as further information was sought. What you actually intend to achieve by going back once again to staff on this particular issue, I cannot fathom. I do know that the committee well canvassed this issue, that it was quite clear that we had at least one contract that was already involving the use of diversity information, in that case the data on those with disabilities. Data on those with disabilities is indeed part of asking for whether firms collect diversity information. This council has already made it quite clear we are extremely interested in that particular information. If anything, the proposal or the advice from our staff that caused minor amendments to our procurement policy, which were passed by the committee, was a drawing back from the procurement policy that was already in place. So I am completely puzzled as to why there would be any attempt to put 7.6 on the table in any way, shape or form, or what further information could be required that would make any difference to the outcome fully discussed at committee level. I challenge you to rethink this decision of withdrawing that particular aspect of the minutes and the recommendation to council.
Yep. Welcome to do that. My decision stays the same as it is.
And I ask you to put every recommendation separately from these minutes.
Yep. I will not be putting recommendation 7.6. That's left on the table. And that's my final decision on it. So I'll do them individually. We have a recommendation to council. Oh, sorry, we got the minutes. So we need to accept the minutes from the meeting on the 20th of May. Mover and seconder. Mover. Seconder, Alan, thank you. All those in favour?
No.
Anybody opposed?
Division.
Yes.
Division.
Yeah. Division on the call for accepting the minutes? Yeah.
Every resolution.
That's fine. All those in favour show with raising the hand for accepting the minutes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that has failed, means those minutes are not accepted.
Just ask everyone again in case there's any abstentions.
Oh, sorry. I need to record those who are opposed. In case there are people that want to abstain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, have we got a 6-all draw? Excellent. I have the casting vote. Those minutes will be accepted. Right, moving on.
Then I will point out on that matter that that is not the status quo position. That is usually what the casting vote is used for.
Sorry, run it again.
That is not the status quo position for which casting vote is usually used.
Well, when we've got a 6-all vote, the chair has a casting vote. Are you saying that's not the case?
The chair has a casting vote which is usually used for the status quo position.
So that is the custom, Mayor Clark, but it is not the requirement. And there have been examples in the past where the mayor has not voted for status quo. It is a power reserved for the chair to exercise. But Councillor Soper is quite correct, that is the established custom. Whether receiving the minutes or not is the established custom. It's not a matter I'm going to provide advice on.
I do need some advice. So if I accept Councillor Soper's position and don't have a casting vote, we have a split 6-6 vote.
Like you have a casting vote. Councillor Soper wasn't saying you didn't.
So if I was to do the status quo, what advantage is there? Where will this end up if we do not accept the minutes? They will stay in abeyance till the next full council meeting in a month's time?
So if the minutes aren't received by this council, they will go simply through to the next Finance and Policy Committee meeting for their confirmation. This council is only receiving the minutes, and the key purpose of the council receiving the minutes is to pass the recommendations made by the committee. So this council receiving or not the minutes it's a matter of form and or protest from the councillors.
So I'll use my casting vote that we do accept the minutes. Right, we have recommendations now. And did I hear you, Alex, say that you wanted individually and with
the division?
Okay, so the first recommendation is 6.6, which is approve the budget adjustments outlined in schedules, changes in the plan budget in Q3 performance report. Moved, seconder. Grant. Show of hands for those that are in favour of that recommendation to council. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Carried.
Record against, please.
Sorry? Yep.
Record
Yep.
against.
Everyone will be recorded against because it's division.
Thank you.
Yep. Section 7.6, I am not in that, so that's left on the table. 7.7, which is it retires the public liability and professional indemnity insurance policy. Noting this matter is now incorporated within the revised procurement policy.
Do you want to move?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll move.
Chair, can we actually move that if you don't already move 6?
Correct. Probably not.
No, I think you need, and then if you leave 6 on the table, you probably leave 7 on the table.
Okay. So I'll put 7.8 that adopts the revised road naming policy.
Move.
Mover. Seconder. All those in favour by show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's a majority.
Division record.
Sorry?
Division record.
Yep, everybody that's opposed.
You just going with everyone that's opposed,
Yeah.
it's on there as well, everyone that's
Yeah.
not voting for.
On 7.9, that it notes the minor amendment to the CCTV policy.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Right?
Seconded.
Tom, all those in favour?
Aye.
Hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Carried. And then for 8, policy updates, submissions, media, social policy and privacy policies. 8.4 adopts the submission policy.
Yep.
Right. Seconder Barry, all those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Carried. And 8.5 adopts the media and social media policy. Move back in a second, Tom. Thank you. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Carried. Okay, moving on to the Waste Minimisation Act and Litter Act consultation submission, which is item 11. In the second, sorry.
I'll remind council that we've got a hard stop at 5 o'clock, where the council wants to start this particular item before going to an adjournment. Whether they want this one to.
Just note, Chair, this is for submission.
Health and safety in relation to Environment Southland.
So something at 5.
Health and safety in relation to the Environment Southland site.
On site.
We've got to get off site.
We've got to go site by 5. Can be done in 10 minutes.
Absolutely.
I can be. I can be.
All right. So initially a mover and a seconder for this submission.
Mr. Mayor, before you make that call, I just wanted to clear not exactly a conflict of interest, but something that needs to be on record that I did sit on the Waste Minimisation Act Select Committee in 2008. I don't believe that does create a conflict of interest, but it does create an issue that I think needs to be on the record.
Okay, thank you for raising that. I'm quite happy for you to continue to participate and vote. A mover and a seconder.
We move to 3 with agrees.
Sorry?
There's 3 recommendations.
Yep.
So I'm happy to move with agrees to proceed with the submission.
Yep, thank you.
Second that.
Yep, thank you. And the floor is yours, Darren. If you want to add on.
The only things I'd say is that this is obviously off the back of the new waste strategy that was released earlier in the year, that as often is the case, the government is now moving through the respective legislation that's relevant to that. This submission is intended to be a joint waste net submission. So the three councils at a staff level requested Fiona as the Waste Net Director to prepare a submission that all three councils could have Waste Net submit on their behalf. This submission is going to each of the three councils for their approval, and if it is approved, it would be submitted before submissions close at the end of this week. Key pieces of interest would simply be around the product stewardship system, which we've discussed it to some extent at this table, is being replaced by a new framework for extended producer responsibility. I won't go into the details, but they are in the submission. Some changes around the waste levy and the allocation of funding to different councils, something that appears to be sensible from our perspective, in terms of noting that there are some core costs associated with running waste operations, and that you get a greater efficiency the bigger centre that you are. And then the final piece just being around the Litter Act compliance and enforcement, and a reasonable pushback from us in the submission around ensuring that there is funding if there is an expectation associated with council doing more in the compliance and enforcement space on behalf of central government. Happy to take any questions.
Yep. Any questions, Councillor Reid?
Look, I'm not supporting this because it's silent on something I raised regarding the emission trading levy, that $63 per tonne, regardless of what goes to landfill. It could be a complete truckload of concrete, which has no emissions, goes to landfill, and $63 per tonne is taxed by the government. The other ludicrous thing about this is that AB Lime runs a Class A landfill which captures 100% of all emissions that are in the landfill. Now, this is a tax imposed per tonne that is just a money grab by the government. And furthermore, AB Lime have just put on a 1 megawatt generator, which uses the captured gas to produce electricity, which we all know we need more of. Now, why, and I can't believe this, I raised this during debate in the Waste Net meetings, why we are not asking government to actually think sensibly about this restrictive tax that could have the country producing more electricity. And as far as trying to say, oh, well, we just don't want to fill up holes and valleys. Well, AB Lime, if they stop taking lime now out, we have 100 years of hole to fill in, 100 years. And that's with no more lime taken out. So whether we're in a unique situation or whatever, but our submission should show Southland's position with a great landfill operator. And sorry, I can't support it because it's silent on a very critical thing.
Further questions before I come back to that? Erin, is it possible that submission, given that's a three council submission, could incorporate the issues that Ringy quite rightly raises?
The issue would be that it would need to be amended and go on to the agendas of the other councils, which I believe have already been completed.
He raises a couple of very good points that we should be reflecting on.
I think what Fiona advised, because she did expect that the question may come up, was that it was more of a position for the industry to advocate on behalf of that in terms of the landfill operators around their tax on gas emissions and the framework within which they operate, as opposed to the TA's role. So at this stage, WasteNet hadn't stepped into that advocacy space on behalf of landfill operators.
So again, is it possible that issues that Ringy raises, which we would want to raise, I guess, could be added as an appendix to the report that goes away, so we could share it with the other councils, but doesn't need to go back through the approval process? Is that an option?
I think it would be reasonable for ICC to add an addendum to the submission that's specific to ICC.
Sure. You okay with that, Rangi?
I'd have to see it first, sorry.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, one would assume that Rangi could be involved in the drafting process.
The key thing being it would need to be signed off by weekend. By, yes, so submissions close on Sunday.
There's no time.
Okay with that?
Well, there's no time. Sunday.
Point of clarification, Mr. Mayor, there is nothing to stop Councillor Pottinger submitting that very pertinent piece of information on his own account as a person with the relevant experience and it not being on behalf of ICC, because I think that point is well made. We need to have it signed off, so it's not going to happen in time for inclusion in ICC's or the joint submission. But Councillor Pottinger in his own right has a wealth of experience in this field. If he were to make a personal submission, he would be taken as seriously as any other submitter. And I would urge him to do that, because I think the point is that he is making is well made and relevant, but it's just too late in our process to be able to add it informally, I think.
I guess the challenge to that, Erin, is that Rangi has got the time to get that submission together before the deadline. And why wouldn't we attach it to our submission, because it adds weight?
I would take, I guess, advice from Morris around there could be a resolution for that additional addendum to be approved, delegation to be approved to the Mayor and Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the way to do it, to ensure that there is this further submission directly from ICC in addition to that from the WasteNet Council.
Is the mover comfortable with that being added?
Who was the mover?
Me.
Oh.
As the mover,
Dermot is with that too. The mover is
as.
Yeah.
Oh, you okay with that?
Yep.
Who was the second question?
So can I just clarify a couple of things? So, so it's ICC, so Rangi would prepare something on, so it's ICC putting an amendment to it, saying this is what Andrew is as a council.
Yes.
We've supported the intent of what he said.
Yes, okay, cool.
Well, he's our delegate on
The second thing is a question of process. So Rangi, did you raise your view at WasteNet?
I always have.
It's been brought up.
And so they chose to
And
ignore it.
we had a presentation, remember we had someone from a consultancy firm came and talked to us at a presentation, and I raised it with her, and
So, but WasteNet haven't picked it up.
yes, it's WasteNet know about it, absolutely.
But they haven't picked it up in terms of the
Oh,
submission.
no, it hasn't been written into the submission.
But has the submission been through WasteNet before it's come here?
No.
It's just come straight here.
This is ours, correct. And that's due to the timing of obviously legislative submission processes. Around what Councillor Pottinger, I absolutely acknowledge he's raised his views around the emissions trading scheme and the role of central government trying to restrict waste to landfill via the emissions trading scheme several times. There has not at any stage, though, been a resolution of WasteNet requesting staff to take up that advocacy role on behalf of commercial landfills.
So the mover has agreed to the addition, and the seconder, which was myself, also agrees to that. But it would need to be only an ICC addendum, because there is no time to consult the other two partners.
Okay. It's the way forward if we're happy with that.
I really don't see the time available, but maybe, but yeah, it's a big ask for a quality document to be prepared.
We're in no man's land.
How long does it take to write an email?
I might do a YouTube skit.
Anyway, I'll put the motion that we adopt the submission. option if Raggy wants to exercise it to add an appendix.
Would that be signed by the mayor?
Absolutely.
Well, if that's the case, then I will support this.
Excellent. Those in favour?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We're way past our deadline, so you can see the shuffling. Just two quick things. The Chief Executive's Management Report, if somebody wants to move, we've seen that. Given that we don't have an option to do questions this time, because we're past our deadline to get out of the building. Yes. Yeah, Grant and Trish, thank you. All those in favour? Yeah, Michael, the adoption of the fees and charges. Can we do that quickly?
Through yourself, Chair, if there's any questions, I would suggest we need to put it on hold, but if there's no questions, then I'm happy to put it forward to.
Prepared to move the recommendations.
Thank you. Aaron, thank you. Everyone's in favour?
Aye.
Carried. So the rest of this is,
That's the end of
On time limit.
So what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Are we just adjourning this to next month? Is that the?
well, the stuff that's in PE. We need to hold an extraordinary meeting somewhere to adopt those. Or alternatively, they go forward to the next meeting.
Are we not able to link into the live stream at 5 o'clock from here and then the Zoom?
We've got to be out of the building.
We've got to be out of the building.
Gotta be gone.